Hey, everybody, this is David Isley, Carolina's own. Looking forward to being on the Get Me Back My Pro Wrestling. Very excited to be on the show. Let's get to it.
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
Hey, this is Jimmy from the Live and in Color with Wolfie D and Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling podcast. Would you like to also make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere, and even earn money, all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. And that's how you're hearing this right now. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. And best of all, it's totally free with no catch. Ever since I discovered Spotify for Podcasters, it's made the job of producing multiple podcasts so much easier. I highly recommend you give it a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started today.
This is Steve Bowtie Bryant here. Back in the 90s, I was a pro wrestling photographer for the South, and I released what might have been one of the original sets of indie trading cards. I ran across some of these original sets. They were up in Randall Fanning's attic all this time. PG-13 rookie card, Ricky Morton, George Weingroff as the Sheik, Chris Champion, Reno Riggins, Billy Montana, Gary Valiant, the Scorpion, the Medic, Rick Reynolds, Jeff Daniels, Mephisto and Dante, Ben Jordan, Steve Neely, Marcus Woodrow, Clinton Charisma, Little Farmer John. If you'd like an opportunity to get these cards, contact me now. You can get them for only $49.99. Contact me at stevebowtiebryant at iCloud.com. Get your set now while supplies last.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome one more time to the Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling podcast. And I am here as always with my brother from the same father and mother, Jared, the Plastic Sheik Street. What's up, dude?
Hey man, not much. Just ready for this interview, man. It's looking at these questions we got laid out. It's going to be a good one.
Yeah, I mean, you know, dude, it's just like, man, it's 3 2-pagers in a row.
Yeah, man. Yeah, they intimidate me when they get into the length they are, but they're always good. So.
Yeah, definitely. Lots of great stories, lots of great people. I guess we can go ahead and say, as if they don't already know, we have Carolina's own Dave Isley on the show today. Very excited about that. So
yeah, man, he's worked WCW, WWF, All Japan. I mean, and numerous other places. So I mean, it's going to be. It's going to be some good stories.
Absolutely. And, you know, got to thank Tommy Angel for hooking this one up. You know, I like this, you know, the way that it's working right now, the domino effect of like, okay, this guy, you brought this guy on, and maybe the next guy, who knows? Who knows who will be next? So, but, you know, last episode before this is doing awesome. Once again, thank y'all so much for listening. We definitely appreciate that. You know, Rick McCord, that episode, that was just another guy that, man, he's just done everything. It's like, wow, is this the new norm for us? You know what I mean? That we're just to know that anybody is giving us their time is definitely humbling, man. Very, very humbling.
Oh, absolutely. These guys, I mean, I've said it and probably wore it out some with the listeners, but I mean, these guys just continually have been there and done that.
Yeah.
And when you hear these names that we're going to mention today, you're going to be like, man,
I know
this guy's wrestled everybody.
Yeah, I know. It's just incredible. And again, we're so appreciative of all these gentlemen who spent their time and did their whole career and then are now spending their time with us to tell their story. You know, I'm not only glad that they give us that opportunity, but that we have that platform for them, you know. So, and all these guys truly fit the Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling motto of, you know, hey, these guys are the exact model of Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling, because they're the pro wrestling that we want to be back to somebody to give us back. You know what I'm saying? So I think that made sense. But anyway, you all get it. It's
give
simple.
us back this pro wrestling that we're talking about.
Yeah, give me back that pro wrestling that you had. Anyway, long story short, fun episode. Can't wait to bring him on. So I say let's go ahead and bring him on. Why not?
Let's get to it.
All right. Hey, by the way, he's a big UNC Tar Heels fan, so I know. Let's just step aside. Yeah, we'll skirt around that.
We're not even going to mention that, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that I have a problem with it. It's you, Jared. So
I know. It's my problem.
All right. Well, we'll just leave that question in the tank. We'll be right back after these messages with more from Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling and our very special guest, David Isley.
Hey guys, this is Wolfie D from PG-13. Check out my podcast, Live and in Color with Wolfie D, every Monday at noon. We're talking Memphis, we're talking ECW, WCW, WWF, everywhere that I've been. We even have some great guests, some Hall of Famers on the show with us. Every Monday, Live and in Color with Wolfie D.
That's right, it's the talk of Middle Tennessee, the channel you love to hate and the channel you hate to love. It's Brian Turner from Brian Turner's VHS Rehab. And if you're looking for matches from Wolfie D to Jerry Lawler to Dusty Rhodes and the team that put a pimp before your eyes and a goatee between your thighs, Booty Call and Athena, go to lostwrestling.com. See, I made it easy for you. Brian Turner's VHS Rehab. Booyah.
All right, we are back with more from the Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling podcast. And just like we said in the intro there, we've got one of the awesome guys of this business. Some say he's a Thunderfoot. Some say he's just an all-around great guy. But we know him as Carolina's own David Isley. David, thank you for being on the show with us today.
Hey, looking forward to it, guys. I'm ready to talk some old stories that I haven't talked about in a long time. I'm sure I've got some that, you know, a lot of the folks and a lot of the fans haven't heard from another perspective. So let's get into it.
Love it,
man. Yeah, that's what we're all about.
Yeah. So, Jared, we always start with your question. Kick it off, brother.
All right, David. So this question right here is just meant to kind of show the listeners and us kind of your influences or your favorite people you worked with, maybe. Give me your like top 4 or top 5, like a Mount Rushmore of professional wrestlers.
You know, that's a great question. And looking back over the time, you know, I'm going to kind of date myself a little bit because of where I'm at in life now. But, you know, when I was growing up, you know, if I had to look at my top 5 Mount Rushmores at the time, definitely would have been a Wahoo McDaniel, a Jack Briscoe, definitely a Blackjack Mulligan, probably a Mr. Wrestling Tim Woods. And you have to have the Nature Boy Ric Flair in there as well. Those were probably some of the guys that I looked up to when I was starting out and just breaking into the wrestling business. But there's just so many more names that influenced me over the years. But that's a few off the top of my head that I can remember that that really because you have to understand, guys, when I was coming through, we didn't have the internet back then. We didn't have cable television till later on in the 80s. So when I was a kid growing up, all I was able to get was Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling with Bob Caudle and Rich Landrum and David Crockett. And sometimes on Saturday mornings, if I turned my rabbit ears just right, I could probably get a little bit of the Fuller's program out of Tennessee.
Yeah.
What a list, man. That's a great list. And when you got Wahoo McDaniel on there, man, that's a great start to it, man. It's a awesome list.
And let's be honest, David. Let's be honest, man. All you need is Mid-Atlantic when it comes down to it, right? Come on.
Well, that's very, very true because, in 1975, I got my first Pro Wrestling Illustrated magazine. Somebody gave it to me when I was a junior in high school. And from that point on, I was sucked in. I started watching it on television around 1974, 75. And from that point, I was just sucked in, and it's been like that ever since.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that sounds similar to us. We actually got into it way early in our life, but we were seeing guys like you on TV, so it was pretty awesome. So there's the circle right there. So you actually led me in a great direction there, David, and I appreciate this. Is going to be easy, man. I can tell. So my first question always starts like this. Tell us a little bit about your younger days. Where were you born? Your high school? Did you play sports? That kind of stuff?
Absolutely. So I was born in Charlotte, North Carolina in 1962. So I'm 61 years old now. I went to school in Hendersonville, North Carolina. So I was close to the Asheville Civic Center, where I actually saw the Mid-Atlantic live events, back in that time. Awesome. My father was with, at the time, Esso, which is now ExxonMobil, and we moved around a little bit from Hendersonville, North Carolina to Greenville, South Carolina. And then we spent, the last, long few years up around Charlotte, North Carolina, over into the Concord, North Carolina area is where I spent most of my time. Yeah. I technically graduated high school in Concord, North Carolina. I'm not as close to some of those folks because I moved there, when I was a junior in high school. So, the folks that I really bonded with and keep in touch on a very regular basis are the folks from right up the road from where I live out here in Greenville, up in Hendersonville, North Carolina. So that's kind of where I was born and how it all started.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, I'm in Mooresville now. Jared, my co-host and brother, he went to college in Monroe. So we're all about Mecklenburg County. So we all got So we have fun, and it's cool, man. I met a guy doing grand jury and actually ended up meeting Tommy Angel through that, and then through Tommy I've met you. So man, it's just like a big snowball. I'm so stoked about this.
It's good. It's good to reminisce about the old stories. I don't talk about them too much anymore, and so I had to kind of get back into my memory banks a little bit and kind of pull some of that out from quite a few years ago.
Well, we thank you immensely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, okay. So you brought it up now. You talked about getting your first magazine in high school and being enthralled by then after. Right. And obviously, I live in Mooresville now, so you probably know what I'm leading to here. Yeah. Talk about meeting Nelson Royal and getting your start in the wrestling business.
Okay. So that's a great question. So in 1984, I was working actually part-time for Ricky Steamboat at his Mid-Atlantic gym in Charlotte. Nice. And I became very, very close with Rick and his family, still very close with Rick today. Actually, he and I, his birthday is also in February, so I happened to be up in the Knoxville area back in February. So I met him and his wife and took him out for his birthday at the end of last February. So a lot of the guys were coming in there working out. And some of the names that were coming in there working out at that particular time were Downtown Denny Brown, who was a former NWA junior heavyweight champion, very close friend of mine. Hector Guerrero was a regular in there. There was an old guy by the name, he went by the wrestling name in the Mid-Atlantic area called Bret Hart. That was really Barry Horowitz from the WWF. Yeah. So Danny Spivey was coming in there to work out. Scott Hall was coming in there to work out. You had Piper. So at that particular time, I was still living in Concord, but I was working for Rick at the gym in Charlotte part-time. So actually, my former tag team partner, who and I hooked up as the Thunderfoots later on, Gene Ligon. Gene ran a gym in Charlotte. So in roughly 1986. A lot of other people don't know this as well. I kind of piggyback a little bit on a story, but Nicola Roberts, who went on, to become Baby Doll here in the North Carolina area, she was coming in there, and she was using Gene's tanning beds, and her and I actually dated a few times back in the 80s, and we're still very good friends. She's married and family now, but we've still very good friends. And so Nelson Royal was actually coming in there to work out. He and his daughter Shannon, they owned the Western store up in Mooresville. So Gene knew that I had been interested in becoming a professional wrestler, and so Nelson and I got together when he was in there working out. He told me he was going to be having tryouts up in Mooresville at his camp on his property up there in Mooresville. So that's how I met the guys that I came through camp with. You probably remember, of course, Tommy Angel, but there were others that came through the camp that I met that first day. Colt Steele. Yeah. There was a wrestler by the name of Mitch Snow who went on to become in the AWA, did some work in the AWA. Ricky Nelson, Gene's son, Brad Anderson was there. There was also another guy from Salisbury who worked underneath for the Crockett's with us. He went by the name Larry Stevens, but most people knew him by L.A. Stevens from up in the Salisbury area. Okay. And then later on, and what made it really special for us is, and I will always say that Nelson and Gene Anderson were a little bit harder on us in wrestling camp because it was their first wrestling camp. But a lot of people don't know later on through that camp, like the second or third camp that came through there, we had the names of like Ken Shamrock and Johnny Ace also come through that wrestling camp as well. Yeah. So a lot of guys came through that camp. So that's how we all got to know each other very, very closely around 1986. And it's no secret, Crockett at that particular time, Jim Crockett needed some guys, some underneath guys to come in and work the TVs and come in there, and because a lot of people don't really fully understand the real, a lot of guys and a lot of fans will say, well, he was just a job guy, this, that, and the other. But if you really ask a good veteran in the business, a good quality underneath talent enhancement guy, they can either make you or break you on television.
Absolutely.
So we all knew what we were there to do. We were there to per se do a job and get the top guys over and make them look good. And with that, we continued to get more work. J.J. Dillon, who was the assistant booker at the time when I was there, and Dusty was the head booker there. J.J., respected our work. He respected our talent. He thought a lot of Nelson and Gene. So when he was able to give us, a few more bookings here and there. So he kept us very busy, while Crockett was running television. We stayed extremely busy, and we picked up some house shows here and there to put some extra money in our pockets. So I'm always been very thankful to JJ for keeping us busy back during those times.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is very cool. You just named so many incredible people. It's just like, right. It's just like you're kind of like a punching bag right now. I'm just trying to take all that in. That's amazing. Yeah. All those people that you were around at that time, Right.
So like, as far as like your first match, and like, was it for like a certain promotion, or was it through?
Actually, my very, very first match, I was scared to death. I was petrified because I was in the ring. I was tagging with Larry Stevens, L.A. Stevens, and we had our very first match was with the Midnight Express, which was beautiful Bobby Eaton and Loverboy Dennis Condrey. And,
that's awesome.
Nice. And on the outside of the ring was Big Bubba Rogers and Baby Doll, who was also part of that match as well. So. And cool. Cornette was down at the, I think at the announcer's table, talking with Tony Schiavone at that particular time. But that was my first match, and I was, extremely nervous, and later on, it was funny because I would go back and watch that match. I haven't seen it in quite a few years, but I would go back and look at that match. And, and I don't really remember what I did, but I did something stupid and not knowing the difference. And I could just see a big grin on Bobby Eaton's face like he was just laughing, So, but if you got to know Bobby, that was just Bobby. That's just who he was.
Great guy.
But great guy. So that was my first match in my pro wrestling career.
Wow.
Yeah.
I can't believe that it's uphill from there too, man.
That's a memorable first match. And Bobby Eaton, legitimately one of the best workers of all time. I mean, it's
no question.
And Bobby was just a sweetheart of a guy, and I could go on and on about, the guys we worked with, and look, guys, it's no secret. There were better guys to work with on television, and, there were some that were not as easy to work with. Anytime you looked at the booking sheet and you saw your name with either the Rock and Roll Express or Jimmy Valiant or a Bugsy McGraw or the Midnight Express, or Jimmy Garvin, someone like that, you knew that you were going to be taken care of. And, even a guy like Arn Anderson, another sweetheart of a guy who really tried to work with the underneath guys on television because he knew the value of having a good match on television. He didn't want to go out there unless they were working an angle like a Bash or a War Games or something like that. He didn't want to go out there and just beat the underneath guys up on television.
Right.
He wanted to go out there and have a match if he could. So I was never shy about, if I wanted to suggest something to Arn, he would always try to work it in if he could, a spot maybe that I wanted to do. So just another sweetheart of a guy to work with in the ring that you knew was going to take care of you.
Yeah, that's incredible. Well, so we do this little thing we like to call the name game. And so to kind of, the way we do it is we say a name and then you kind of bring up a thought or a little story or whatever. And maybe if it jogs a memory, whatever. So DJ, hit the music. I'm going to go ahead and start with this one because from my list of matches that I could see, especially the ones that are on TV, this was on December 28th, 1986. You wrestled with Larry Stevens against Ole and Arn Anderson. So talk about those guys. Yeah,
that's a great question, and I do remember something very, very vaguely about that match. It came back to me later, but Ole, of course, knew at the time, and I'm going to tell you that was probably one of my, I had only been in the wrestling business maybe 3 or 4 months at that particular time.
Right.
I had watched Ole growing up as a kid, and so Ole I knew was could be very rough in the ring. So we were standing there kind of at the gorilla position, getting ready to go out. Larry and I were standing there, and Arn and Ole were standing there right in front of us. All of a sudden, Ole takes his fist and he punches a wooden cabinet that sat right there at the gorilla position. And he said, I am in a pissed off mood today, and I'm going to beat somebody's ass out here in this ring today. I am not in a good mood. And I looked at Larry and I said, we're getting ready to get killed. But when we got out there, Ole was just as light as a feather. I mean, he was just as light as a feather. He was just playing a rib on us.
Yeah.
And, because he knew we were green. He knew we were one of the team's guys. So, but he really took good care of us. But I got to tell you, I was very nervous going to the ring.
Ole is one of the best heels of all time. Like just pure heel. Like he is. It's like perfect,
a lot of people don't know this about Ole, but Ole was stabbed right here in Greenville, South Carolina, many years ago, and that knife from when one of the fans stabbed him, just by a split inch, missed his heart. Sure did.
Oh, wow.
Man.
Yeah.
That's scary.
Absolutely.
And these new guys think they got it rough,
Well, there's a difference now. Back in the days when I was, when we were telling, real story, we had storylines that played out for a number of weeks, months, and years at a time. Ole and Gene were what we call heat magnets. And, they really, really got a lot of heat. And of course, now the wrestling business has changed so much, they're not really out there trying to get heat anymore. But the angles that they ran back in the day really, really got some fans upset.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
All right, how about Nikita Koloff?
Wow, Nikita. Yeah, Nikita and I are very close. I haven't talked to him in a while, but Nikita lived pretty close to me in Concord, North Carolina. I got to be very close with Nick back when he owns Nikita's gym in Concord, North Carolina. I was very close with Nick. Nick was married at the time to a young lady down in Alabama which you guys probably know. She ended up developing cancer,
right?
And he tried to do what he could to try to heal the cancer, and but of course she ended up passing away. I don't really remember what year that it was, but Mandy ended up passing away after a certain period of time, and but Nick and I have always I was actually a pallbearer in Mandy's funeral, and so that's but Nick and I traveled together on the road quite a bit. I've got a quick Nikita Koloff story.
Please.
So Nikita, he had a Cadillac back in the day, a white Cadillac with tinted windows, and he was going out of town, and he and I were very close, and I said, "Hey Nick, you're going to be out of town." I said, "Can I take your car out if I need to?" Yeah. And he said, "Sure. Yeah. Go ahead. Take the car." Well, I took his car and I drove it down to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. So back during those days, it was no secret. I'm not the same guy that I was back in those days, thank goodness. But I kind of frequented a lot of adult entertainment businesses.
Sure.
And so I had the car, full of the ladies, in the car one night. And we were riding around Myrtle Beach. And so when I finally went back to Concord, Nikita had not been home. And to this day, I still don't know how he found out. But he came up to me and he says, "What are you doing hanging around in Myrtle Beach with adult entertainers hanging out my car window?" And I still to this day never know how he found that out, but he did.
He had his sources in the KGB.
He did. Yeah, he really did. He really did.
Holy cow. Wow. We're starting with an incredible story. There you go. Oh, man. Nikita's a great guy. I got to meet him a couple times. Very nice man.
Yeah.
Very, very
nice guy.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next name on the list is the superstar Bill Dundee.
Superstar Bill Dundee, I was never around Bill too much. I was around him a couple of times in, back to the Crockett's. He came in, and I don't really remember why Dundee was brought in. I do know that Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert was around some during that time, and Dundee was there as well. I don't know whether it was part of a deal, maybe that Crockett. George South would certainly know more about that than me, but why they were there in the territory at that time. But Bill was always a solid worker. He was an old school worker. So that is something that I particularly enjoyed, was the old school type of work that we did back in the day. Not all the, not all the high flying, we got a hold, we worked it, that sort of thing. So I didn't know Bill real well. I only worked with him a couple of times on television, but that's really the only memories that I have of Bill. I never really got to know him too well.
Yeah. Well, our listener base is a lot of them are in Tennessee. I bring up certain names mainly because of that, And Bill, I've met him a couple times, and every time that he's been in the back, I did a little work as a manager back in about 10 years ago in Nashville, and that's how I met all these wrestlers that I know. And every time he was on a show, and he would be watching a match, he was like, "Oh, they're killing the business. They're killing the business."
That's Bill is very old school.
Yeah.
Just like Nelson Royal was. I look at some of the things they do now, and I'm certainly not knocking the business and what it's turned into. It's not necessarily for me, but the way that I was brought up, I was brought up to, back when kayfabe was really alive and well. And, I spent my whole career protecting the business and, protecting the behind the scenes, the secrets of it. And it's still hard sometimes, to have conversations with certain people about, kind of doing an expose of the business. So
right.
A part of me still feels really strange about talking about some of those things because,
of course, yeah,
we just didn't do it. You just don't do it.
Yeah,
you just didn't do it. Yeah.
No, and I mean, we're gracious to you for that because a lot of guys are very against certain things about it. But,
Sure.
when you've got Jim Cornette, who's probably one of the biggest kayfabe guys ever at the time,
right.
Telling the whole story, it's kind of hard,
Sure.
But
I remember, we protected the business,
Yes.
Back in the days when I was, if I had just worked an angle with somebody and I happened to be in a gas station with those guys, if we ended up, if they were there before me, I would get back in the car and leave because I did not want to expose the business, or I didn't want to be seen talking with that person that I had just had a match with in a public place. We just didn't do that.
Yeah. That was the way the business was, man. That's
absolutely.
I think in a lot of ways I miss that era, in a lot of ways.
Well, and that's what guys, that's what I tell people. If you never really experienced Jim Crockett Promotions live, what you see on YouTube and maybe on the WWE network and things of that sort just doesn't do it justice. If you really weren't, if you weren't a part of the Great American Bash, if you weren't, if you weren't on the front row watching it and living it and breathing it and traveling with the guys, you just can't really appreciate how over Jim Crockett Promotions territory really was.
Amen.
Yeah. You know something though, those one thing that YouTube at least, and maybe WWE Network or whatever has kept alive is there are so many people influenced by those Ric Flair promos, those Dusty Road promos.
Right.
I mean, and Jim Cornette and on that little set in the Atlanta studio there where you just see all those people cutting promos. Those are big little, like if you go anywhere that just shows clips, you see a lot of those. I mean, just because they're so memorable, and they're so good, and so much better than anything you can see today, honestly.
Yeah.
And I can remember when I see some of those now, I can vividly remember, where because the Atlanta, the TBS studio was not a real big studio, and we were there on Saturday mornings at 9:00 in the morning filming, and sometimes it was extremely cold in that little building. It was extremely cold, but it was hard to work a crowd in front of in a studio environment like that. It could be a little bit tough at 9:00 in the morning. At 9:00 in the morning,
I bet.
Yeah.
How about two of the or a tag team that gets like the biggest pop ever, the Road Warriors?
Oh my gosh. I became very, very close with Joe, Road Warrior Animal. I became very close with Joe and, his brother, Johnny Laurinaitis. And they also have another brother down in Atlanta, Mark Laurinaitis. But I became very close with those guys, later on down the road. But, another situation that comes to mind is, you cannot fully understand unless somebody was there, or like me who was standing in the ring, when you hear the Road Warriors music coming on and you see those guys busting through the door and they're running at that, that ring 90 miles an hour, and they get up under the ropes and they come in there and they're wild. I mean, they are wide open. And when you get in the ring with them, they're not going to give you anything. If you're working underneath, they're just going to go in there. They're going to beat you up. And, that's just what you're there for. And that's what you did. And, but I remember one time working with those guys, and I don't know that I was the first, but I do know that I was probably one of the first. Was when they did that finish, and I don't remember what the name of it was. When
Doomsday
when I got on top of Animal's shoulders, and then Hawk would dive off with the clothesline, and Animal would cut you a flip backwards, and you land on your stomach.
Right.
I remember the first time I took that on Atlanta TV. I mean, JJ just came busting through the door. And he looked at me and said, "Isley, are you okay? Are you okay?" And I said, "I'm fine." I said, "I'm fine." Yeah. So that was a little bit of a scary move. And so many years later, when the Warriors actually went to the WWF, I had a little more credibility, those guys, back then. So when we ventured up to the WWF to do some underneath, work for those, some TV for WWF, I had a chance to work with those guys again up there. And I remember Animal saying, Isley, are you in a flipping mood tonight? And,
no, I'm not.
And I said, well, Joe, I said, do I have a choice? He says, not really. And so, but at least he was honest about it. So then he said, no, if you want us to fall back with you, we'll fall back with you. I said, yeah, I'd much rather you. I think I'm at the stage of my life now. I'd appreciate if you'd fall back with me when Hawk's coming off the top. So they graciously did that for me and took care of us. So that was all good.
And that was a very rare thing. I know they did that for guys like Ivan and, some of those guys, but they didn't do that a lot. So you can tell they really respected you. Yeah. But
you have to understand that when they got to the WWF, things were a little bit different when they got up there. If I had to, what I'm trying to say is the road agents for the WWF at the time, they were extremely big on taking care of the guys that came there for TV and gave their bodies to the talents, the top guys. They were extremely saying, hey, I remember, Larry Stevens working with the Ultimate Warrior, and Warrior knocked him out with a clothesline on television. And I vividly remember Jay Strongbow, as soon as Warrior came back through, he was screaming at him, do not do that again. If you can't do it right, do not hurt these guys. We did not have that when we were down working for Crockett. They just pretty much just ate us up, and every how we landed, that's how we landed. But it was a different business. It was a different company, and a different time and different place.
Yeah. Now, is it true that you have a story about Hawk?
Yeah, actually, I do. Hawk. So we were down in Jacksonville, Florida. And I had been in the business a few years now, and actually I was with Tommy Angel when this happened. Okay. Back in the days, you could smoke cigarettes, as you guys probably remember. You could smoke cigarettes inside a restaurant.
Right.
So we were sitting in a restaurant, and at the time I was weighing probably 230, 225, 230. Tommy was probably 250. Animal and Hawk both probably close to 300 at that time. And I remember we were sitting at a table, and some smoke was coming over the back of from the table beside us, was coming over our booth, and and all of a sudden it got quiet, and Hawk, with that voice of his, he goes, God, I hate smoke. and some guy who was sitting there kind of leaned over to see who we were, and as soon as he saw the four of us sitting there eating, he took a cigarette and put it out. So I remember that very, very clearly. Very clearly. Like
that is awesome.
Yeah.
In some cases, that might have been a fight, but that was not a fight then.
Yeah, well, he would not have been one of the guys that you'd want to pick a fight with.
Right, never. Yeah, never.
No.
It's
He's
funny
not that guy.
When the voice would have probably made me drop it in my drink or something,
Mike was a very intimidating man.
Yeah, I bet.
He was a very, very, and he was so brutally strong. Him and Animal both were just brutally strong, and when they pressed us over their head, we didn't have to help them. I mean, they could do it all on their own. They didn't need us to help them.
Oh, I believe it. I believe that.
Oh, yeah, not at all.
Well, so, okay, the next guys, again, you brought them up a little earlier in your first match, but I kind of want to draw a comparison because 87 was kind of a weird year for the Midnights, especially because they had Bobby and Dennis at the start, and then it was Bobby and Stan at the end. And honestly, it came in and it was seamless. They were great from the start and great from the finish there. But I guess draw a little comparison of Bobby and Dennis versus Bobby and Stan.
Well, they are, and I even had a chance to work with Randy Rose, who was part of the other the Midnight.
Right.
He came in there for a little bit of a short time as well when I was there. But talking with the Midnights, of Dennis and Bobby, those guys really just got a lot of heat by themselves. You know, they could really draw the heat, you know, and, you know, to me, they seemed much more like the territory tag teams, old school, so to speak.
Yeah.
You know, and then you had kind of that showman come in with Stan Lane, who was part of a very successful tag team with Steve Kern called the Fabulous Ones up in the Memphis area.
Yeah.
So, you know, Stan to me was more of that showman type of wrestler, and I think Dennis and Bobby were probably more of the kind of the heat. The drawing the heat type of tag teams.
That makes total sense. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, but Stan, you know, they were both successful. They both had good runs, not taking anything away from either tag team. They were both very easy to work with. But there was a little bit different of a style between the original Midnights and then the ones with Stan and Bobby.
That makes total sense. Yeah. I like that.
Another guy that's just an amazing worker and from a long line of from a family of great talent, Brad Armstrong.
You know, that's a great family right there. I had the privilege of working with all of those guys. I think at some point. Now, I did not have a chance to work with Brian BG.
Right.
I did not have a chance to work with him, but I had many matches with Brad. And Bullet Bob, I had many chances to work with those guys, and they were always just such smooth in the ring. Bob would be smoking a cigarette before he went to the ring, and you couldn't blow him up. He was in great shape. But Bob and Brad both just, you know, if you ask any old school, you know, wrestler, territory guy, who would you like to have as an underneath guy in your territory? It's always a Brad Armstrong, because he can go in there. If you can't have a good match with Brad Armstrong, something's wrong.
Yeah, no joke.
Yeah, he was that smooth. And I remember one night at the old at the Coliseum. I want to say it was maybe Ranger Ross that had not showed up that night. I happened to be there at one night, and Ranger Ross had not showed up, and Ole had the book at that time, and he asked me. He said, "Isley, have you got your gear with you?" And I said, "I do." He said, "Well, Ranger Ross isn't here yet. You know, I'm going to give him 10 more minutes, and if he's not, go get your gear. I've got you in the opening match with Arachnoman, which was Brad Armstrong."
Right, right.
So I ended up having that match in the Coliseum with Brad, but Brad was just always such a smooth worker, and I always enjoyed working with, you know, when he was tagging with Timmy Horner. I always enjoyed working with both those guys as the Lightning Express. Just a super mid card tag team. Yeah,
absolutely, great tag team. I love that Lightning Express. They, you know, I always loved Brad and Bullet Bob. I feel like, you know, Brad is probably as smooth, almost as smooth as Ricky Steamboat in a lot of cases, but he also had that same fire that Bullet had. You know, it's an interesting combination. You know, Brad
was an excellent worker, an extra good seller. He knew how to get the guy over that he was working with.
Yeah.
And I remember being in the ring with him several times when I was first breaking in, and man, he really blew me up. He was he was in that good a shape, and he had a body like a Greek Adonis.
Exactly, and he kept it too. That was the other impressive part. You know,
he really did.
Yeah,
he really did.
Well, the next guy I've got on this list is actually, you know, I've hated this guy before, but I've also cheered for this guy. And he always had that valet with him, Precious, but I always liked just Jimmy Garvin. Gorgeous Jimmy Garvin.
You know, I actually had a chance back in Charlotte a couple of years ago. Jimmy and Ronnie were having breakfast at the Hilton there for one of the signings. I had gone to see my good buddy Stan Hansen, and we were having breakfast with those guys. And you know, Jimmy was always just a pleasure to work with in the ring, and he was one of those guys that he was very smooth. He's another guy. You know, if you go in the ring with Jimmy, you know that you're going to be taken care of. He was not what we call stiff.
Right.
He could make his stuff really look good, like he was really hurting you, but he was just so smooth in the ring. Now Ronnie, on the other hand, was a little bit more, vicious, and that's just like night and day with Jimmy and Ronnie. They're just totally two different styles of worker.
I'm glad you brought Ronnie up too, because I just watched a match with you and Ronnie, so that was awesome.
And Ronnie was one of those guys that he could take a beating, and he wanted you to fight him, and if you didn't, he was just going to eat you up.
Yeah,
and that's just the way he was. We tried, but he just ate us up. That's awesome. Just all there was to it. That was all there was to it. But that was just Ronnie's style. It was nothing against him. That was just his style.
Yeah, yeah.
How about Dick Murdoch?
Murdoch, I probably worked with a few times on television. He was another guy that was extremely smooth. Dickie was old school. He and Dusty were very tight. So Dickie, I remember, had the brain buster finish. His finish was just so smooth. I mean, it's the way he protected you in the ring, the way he got your neck, and the way when you're it's like a standing suplex, then you come down for the for the bump or whatever. But he really took care of you. But Dickie's just one of those old school guys that he took care of you on television. He was not out there trying to abuse you, not trying to beat you up or hurt you. He actually went out there and tried to take care of you. But you got to understand, Dickie was that old school type wrestler. That's just the way they worked. Now, could he hurt you? Absolutely, absolutely. Dickie was he could be vicious, but he always took great care of me when I was in the ring with him. Always took care of me.
Oh yeah. I always loved those promos when Cornette was managing him and he was paying him like he was kind of like a mercenary for the Midnight Express. Yeah, exactly. And Jimmy would be cutting his promo and he's really into it, and Dick's just standing there laughing, like smiling.
Oh yeah,
he's popping for it,
well, I remember when there was some six-mans being done with Ivan and Dickie Murdoch and Vladimir Pietrov.
Right,
and they were doing some tagging, and he knew how green Vladimir was. He knew it.
Yeah.
And some of the things that he was screaming in the ring at that particular time, I mean, I remember you can if you watch this particular match, you can hear the fans out there really giving him a hard time, and he screams at the top of his lungs, "Hey Tony, can you shut these kayfabins up out here?" And, that's the way Dickie was, just laughing and having a good time in the ring. But a lot of people never saw that because we protected the business. But Dickie was just a super, super good guy.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, well, the next team is definitely probably my favorite tag team of all time from being a child, the Rock and Roll Express.
Oh my gosh, we could talk about those guys forever. Ricky and Robert, and I still, my phone still rings from Robert from time to time, and we still keep in touch. And they're just a tag team that if you never experience them live, you can't appreciate how over those guys were in the territory.
Right.
There's no telling, how many of those rock and roll posters they sold back in the day, the merchandise sales, what we had back at that time were probably astronomical. The numbers they probably did, but as far as two nice guys and protecting you and taking care of you in the ring, you won't find two better guys than Ricky Morton, Robert Gibson. You just won't. And those guys were just such great baby faces. The way Ricky Morton sold a move, or he sold a hold. It's like Ricky told me one time. He said, I can sell an arm bar like I'm on the way to the electric chair. Right. So you just won't find two better baby faces than Ricky and Robert. You just won't. Not as a solid babyface tag team. One of the best.
Yeah. Absolutely. No question. And so the next two guys, I'm going to go ahead and bring them up because here's the thing. You guys were known as, Tommy Angel, Larry Stevens, Rick Nelson. You guys were kind of like, I would say like a second era of the underneath guys who kind of looked a little more compatible with the guys that were on TV. These guys, however, we remember George South. I got to throw George in there. Love George. Yeah. But these two guys right here actually were kind of that original crew that stayed around and actually ended up winning a match and going to the Crockett Cup. Yeah. Brandy and Bill Mulkey.
The Mulkeys, I haven't seen those guys in a long time. They used to live right down here in Anderson, South Carolina. And Mulkey Mania, I remember I had gotten my shoulder separated, so I was on the sidelines at home for about 8 weeks. And I remember when they had that match with the Gladiators and they won on television that night. Right. I was actually on the card that night when they sold out the Anderson Civic Center when they had that match against the Midnight Express.
Oh, and, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I was myself and Larry Stevens were on that card that night, and we had a nice payoff that night because back then, we did. We got paid on how many people showed up, not on a contract basis. So
right.
Yeah. So the more people that were there, the better we got paid. So the Mulkeys were, that was just something different. It was good to see. It was good for the business at that particular time. And the people loved it.
Yeah, they definitely did. We popped, and that was Gary Royal and George South, right? Am I correct about that? Yeah.
Two fantastic workers. You can't say enough about George and Gary as far as workers. Gary, gorgeous Gary Royal, came in from the Kansas City territory, and he was a former NWA junior heavyweight champion. Something else a lot of people don't know about Gary is that if you go back and watch Starrcade, or when Piper and Valentine were having the dog collar match, Gary was the manager right in the ring there with Valentine, right at the opening of that match.
Wow. So, okay.
With the bleach blonde hair.
Very cool. Very cool.
He had a suit on. So Gary was just another great worker. I can't even tell you how many times I've worked with Gary in the ring, but just such a night off, just such an easy. He and I just always had very smooth matches. But when you say that, you've also got to say again too, if you can't have a good match with George and Gary,
right,
something's wrong. Right, something's wrong. Yeah. Yeah.
I literally just talked to George the other day, and he was just coming off of his table at WrestleCade, and he was doing a favor for me recording a clip, and he was like, brother, I can't talk, but I'm coming off this to do this for you. And if George South left his table, you mean something to him. So
that's exactly 100% correct. If he's going to leave that gimmick table for a minute, you must be special.
Yeah, well, I felt that. He's a great guy. Yeah, I hope that we'll have him on soon, hopefully, because, we can't have you guys on and not have George on, right? So
that's exactly right. But George, I remember George, when we, tell you a quick story about us going, and, this maybe is something you guys want to talk about, but I remember when we got to do, we were invited up to do television for the WWF, and George was part of that crew with us. And as soon as we walked in the door, Vince McMahon walked up to us and thanked us for coming. He called us by name, which we were all surprised at. He called us by name, and we're like, how in the world does he know who we are? And, it's like George said, look, we're his competition down there with the Crockett's. He knows, that's his business, is to know what's on television for the other product. So
exactly.
He knew all of us, and that's why we were invited to come up and work on the television up there. But they were so happy to have us, and Tommy may have told you this before, but we were getting ready to leave that night, and Bobby Heenan walked up to us. There were 6 of us, and he handed us $100 bill, and he said, "Guys, I know this isn't much, but split it amongst you and have a beer on me on the way home." We appreciate you guys. So appreciate you guys coming up here and making our guys look good on television, because if you've got a bunch of crappy underneath talents, enhancement guys on television, your show's going to look terrible.
Right.
But if you've got some that, they know what they're doing, they know how to have a match, it just makes the program so much better. Now, if you ask a guy like Ricky Morton, if you ask him, say, well, who was the best worker in the territory back in the Crockett days? And he said, look, that's a big question. He said, everybody could work back, who was on the card back in those days.
Yeah.
All the way from the top guys down to the underneath job guys. They all knew how to have a match. So it's just that some got more television time than others. But that's just the way it worked out. We knew what we were there to do. We knew we had a job there to do, and I feel like that. With my best work came after I left Crockett, after I left WCW, and I went into Japan and became close with Stan Hansen. And, that's when I really learned how to work, was after I left, and got away from doing televised matches.
Yeah. Well, I promise we'll get there, brother. It's coming soon. Well, we got just a little bit more here. Go ahead, Jared.
How about the total package, Lex Luger?
Yeah, Lex was another guy that, he had a body like $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
Lex was not the most technical wrestler in the world.
Right.
And I think he would tell you the same thing, but he knew the talents that he has. His body was just unbelievable. That's why they called him the total package. He's another guy that really protected the underneath guys on television. He never, ever hurt me one time. Never, ever. He was so easy to work with in the ring. And when you see him now, he's so appreciative of, he may not remember your face or your name, but if you tell him, hey, we worked, television with each other, many times back in the Crockett days, he says, look, I don't remember it, but I just want to say thank you. He said, you guys put your bodies on the line for us night in and night out. He said, I just want to say thanks. That's awesome. That's always nice to hear.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. Well, Jared brought up one of them, and then we've talked about Ole and Arn, but I want to bring up the Four Horsemen as a whole. How was that being around that crew, man? You had Ole and Arn and Flair. You had Tully in there at that particular time. Nobody can really fully understand the magnitude of how over the Four Horsemen really were. That whole era of the Four Horsemen was just unbelievable. They did Crockett did incredible business. Anytime that we were on the card where we were paid, by the people who were there buying a ticket, we always knew we were going to have a good payday. Yeah.
But nobody can really appreciate how over the Four Horsemen were, the original Four Horsemen. They just don't have a clue of really how popular those guys were back in the day, and how much heat those guys got. I mean, a guy like Tully Blanchard, it's like they say, he got heat in the dressing room with the guys. So you knew he could draw heat with the people out in the audience. So just a tremendous era that if you never experienced it live, you just can't fully appreciate it.
Yeah, no doubt.
This other group, they were heat magnets of their own, the Fabulous Freebirds.
Yeah, Michael Hayes and Gordy. I got very close with Terry when I was in Japan, but and matter of fact, Mike works behind the scenes now for the WWE, and he was actually my son had called me recently and wanted to take my grandson to see a match up in Charlotte for TV, and I had sent Michael an email, to his WWE account and said, hey, if you got time to see us for a few minutes, great. If you don't, I know you're busy. But he wrote me back, within about, maybe 3 or 4 minutes, said, hey, Dave, great to hear from you. He said, TVs are kind of hard to manage, and if I have a chance to catch up with you, don't expect me to, but the best time to see me is like at a house show or something like that. But you couldn't ask for two better guys as far as Terry Gordy and Michael Hayes as far as guys in and out of the ring. But I'm going to tell you one thing. Terry was a rough man. I would put him up. I would put him up against anybody. All I can say is thank God he liked me. When he was tagging with Dr. Death, Those were two rough individuals, and I'm so thankful they took care of me. And you just can't imagine the strength of Terry Bam Bam Gordy. You just can't.
Oh no, I have no doubt. Golly, I love those guys though. They were the Rock and Roll Express had their own rock and roll vibe, but they were like rock stars too, man. Those Freebirds,
I remember the Freebirds when they were, kind of in the Georgia territory. I never really got to witness them too much when they were working for the Von Erichs out in Texas. I saw matches of it, and I saw the crowds they drew out there. But I never really got to experience that. But I did see them when they were here working for Georgia. And that's another territory that they really popped really hard was for the Georgia Championship Wrestling. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, the next guy on our list, and I think you know this guy pretty well, but I always thought, there's all these guys that if you were to draw him, I would just say, hey, Dave, draw a pro wrestler. You could easily draw Lex Luger. You could draw Hawk and Animal. You could draw Sting. You could draw Sid. But this guy, I always thought if you drew a pro wrestler and just drew what you thought, I think you would draw him as Todd Champion.
Yeah, Todd had an incredible look. Todd was a very big guy.
Yeah.
Todd was about 6 foot, 6'5", 6'6", maybe. 275, 280 pounds. Former football player for the Rams and former college football player for Utah. And Todd and I were very, very close. Todd and I hung out together quite a bit outside of the ring. We traveled together quite a bit. I remember vividly about Todd is, sometimes I would have when he and I were riding down the road together after a match, I would be in the passenger seat, and if he saw me dozing off and sleeping, he'd slam on brakes and wake me up. So Todd was another great guy that I really enjoyed, being around in and outside of the ring. He had a successful little run with Curtis Thompson, who was Firebreaker Chip, and they did the little I can't remember the tag team they had, maybe down in WCW for a while, but they had a good little run together for a while. But Todd, just a super guy in and out of the ring, lives down in Atlanta, Georgia now. He and I do still keep in touch, and I'm thankful that we're able to do that. But what a big guy he was, and just incredibly strong.
Yeah.
Todd was another guy who was just incredibly strong.
Absolutely.
How about the Warlord?
Oh man, I loved him. Terry, another guy that, brutally strong in the gym. I mean, I have seen this guy personally myself. I've witnessed it, him doing behind the neck presses with 315 pounds. And
golly.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. He was just a monster of a man, but the tag team with him and the Barbarian, just another, the Powers of Pain or whatever, just a super, super sweetheart of a guy, but just incredibly strong. But he's another guy, just light as a feather, wouldn't hurt you for anything. He just would not. None of his moves hurt. I mean, they were all super easy to take.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Being that you're buddies with the Road Warriors, and now when they put the Powers of Pain together, I think what we saw it as was the evil Road Warriors. How did you guys take the two tag teams that were massive monsters that almost looked almost similar,
That's watching those four guys go at it in the ring, I felt sometimes with the Road Warriors, you either loved them or you hated them.
Right.
And the Warriors, people just really got behind that gimmick.
Yeah.
I mean, that gimmick of theirs was so over that, you would have everybody in the building cheering for the Warriors. But when you had the Powers of Pain, then you had Uncle Ivan Koloff, who managed them, or maybe Paul Jones managed them a little bit at one time.
A little bit both, yeah. Yep, exactly.
Yeah, a little bit of both. It was very believable because you had four men that were just incredibly big, and you just wanted to see who was going to win as far as who was the strongest of the four. And I don't think at that particular time, if I was going to put my money on somebody, you they were all strong individuals, but a guy like the Barbarian and the Warlord and Road Warrior Animal, they were just so freaking strong. I mean, it's unbelievable the feats of strength they did in the gym. I mean, the bench presses they did, but you've got guys like Hawk and Animal who came out of that whole clan of up there in Minnesota with Eddie Sharkey's group up there. Rick Rude came out of that. Kurt Hennig, they all came out of that Minnesota territory up there. But just, man, 4 incredibly strong men. And I saw them working out in the gym many times, and my eyes were just amazed every time I saw them working out.
That's no doubt. Yeah. Well, this next one, it's so funny. We've been talking about all these towering big men, but this next guy was never what you would say towering. Always had a great body about him, though, and an evil persona in Kevin Sullivan.
Kevin, I never really. Well, I'll tell you a quick story about Kevin. So he was very snug in the ring. He was another guy that really did not give a whole lot of the underneath guys on television. He did not really give us a whole lot on television. George will be the first. George South will be the first to tell you that, when he hung you upside down in that tree of woe, and when you see him coming at you across the ring, you better cover up a little bit because he doesn't care. He didn't care how he landed when he came to hit you in the turnbuckle with that finishing move. You better take care of yourself. And but Kevin, I was actually down at the TBS studio one time, and back in those days, there were showers. There was a hallway of showers, a few dressing rooms. But at the end of the hall, that's where some of the ladies dressed. And I remember Missy Hyatt was sitting down there at the end of the hall. I was coming out of the shower. I mean, I had a towel and my flip-flops on. Missy was sitting down there at the end of the hallway. Well, Kevin Sullivan walks by me. He yanks my towel off of me.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, so I'm standing there. I'm standing there butt naked in the hallway. Missy Hyatt's looking at me, and I'm trying to bend down and get my towel and kind of cover up. And I'll never forget that. Yeah.
Mm-mm. Yeah.
Never forget that.
Wow.
Right.
Oh goodness! All right, the next name or names, I guess I should say, is the sheep herders. But a lot of people might know them as the bushwhackers. So
two great guys to work with in the ring. Two smooth guys. I'll tell you a quick story about them. They had just given their notice to Crockett. They were leaving the Crockett territory, going to work for the WWF. Actually, Tommy and I were tagging with. Together that on television down in Atlanta against the sheep herders. And I remember those guys coming up to us because they liked us. They liked us a lot. And I remember them coming up to us and say, guys, let's have some fun tonight. And I said, what do you got in mind? He said, we're going to let you, this is our last match before we, on TV, before we go to work for the WWF. We're going to let you throw us around a little bit tonight. So Tommy and I were in there. We were slamming them on television. We were getting a few of our spots in, and I could hear Jimmy Crockett. We're walking through the curtain back in the back, and I overheard Jimmy saying, "Who in the hell let them do that?" But nothing he could do about it. But
right.
That's just the way those guys were. They were probably. I don't know the reason why they left, but. They let me and Tommy throw them around that night on television a little bit, which probably did not go over real well with Jimmy Crockett.
Right. Well, I've interviewed Luke before, and he told the story about it, how he said one day at the studios, he got a call, and it was from Pat Patterson. And he said, you mean we're going to do that, and we're not going to be the same brutal tag team we've been in the territories? So we're going to get paid what you're telling me, and we're going to have a pretty easy doing a comedy gimmick? Yeah, I think we'll do that.
Right.
So,
yeah. I mean, that's a no-brainer. Right.
Yeah, because the sheep herders were a brutal tag team, and then I see them as the bushwhackers, and I'm like, holy cow, these guys have really calmed down. A
lot of bloodbaths those guys had down in Puerto Rico.
No doubt. Yeah. Well, the next guy on the list, he comes up so much through your match history that I wanted to bring him up here because this was, I think, your first match with him was Mike Rotunda.
Yeah, Mike, I had a lot of singles matches with Mike, and I had a lot of tag matches with Mike. I always got along extremely well with Mike because Mike was very good friends and still is with Denny Brown down in Florida, in St. Pete. So I knew Mike very well from Denny, and he always took care of me on television. But Mike was just another guy, super, super collegiate wrestler out of Syracuse. He could wrap you up and tie you up like a pretzel. He was always pretty quiet, but he was one of those guys you didn't want to try him in the ring because he could really wrap you up and hurt you. But Mike, just a super incredible guy. I can't say enough positive things about Mike. Just a super, super good guy to work with in the ring. Just a solid mat technician, so to speak. You put him in the ring with a guy like him and Mark Fleming. I don't know who's going to. I wouldn't know who to put my money on that one. Two rough and tough guys, but for all intents and purposes, Mike was just a super incredible athlete.
That's awesome. This brings up a question because we're bringing up a lot of these guys, and this is kind of basically around the time that Crockett purchases UWF from Bill Watts. Tell me how you felt about that. Did you have any concerns about your job at that time? You're working some great guys, but. Yeah,
we saw what I really thought of at the time is after we kind of got the full story of what was going on, back Crockett had the Crockett show, but then he also had the UWF show, which he kept going for a while. So we were able to kind of get some double work, so to speak. So really, we had already established our name at that particular time. And we actually saw it as a benefit for us because, Crockett needed us. I mean, he needed us to be on television. He had to switch us up a little bit from time to time, but we just saw it as an opportunity to get more work. And that's kind of what we were there for. We wanted to work more, wanted to make more money. It was an easy transition for us. I think that's when Steiner and Sting and some of those guys were brought in from the UWF at the time. But, to me, it was just an opportunity for us to get more work and to make more money.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, that's all you can ask for, I think. Correct. In the long run of things, Yeah. So the next guy I want to bring up is probably another one of these insanely strong guys. I'm going to guess is Ron Simmons.
Oh my God, yeah, Ron, just another. I remember working with Ron early on in his career, and Ron was just so brutally strong. When Ron would throw me into the rope, he would just shove me so hard I would lose my balance sometimes because he was just his adrenaline was so high and he was so strong. And I remember telling him, hey, don't shove me so hard. Just push me and I'll go. I'll run for you and I'll come back. There's no need for you to sling me into the ropes because I'll get there. Right. But it just makes us both look bad if you do that. So he understood, about working. He understood. So he just needed to relax a little bit more. But my gosh, he turned into be such an incredible athlete.
No joke. Yeah, no joke. No joke.
But the strength, but his strength alone was just impeccable. I mean, he was just stupid strong.
Yeah. I've heard a story about him in a bar fight, and he had a broken arm, and he was still handling the guy easily with just his one arm. So
he's another guy that I, you're very thankful if he likes you. But I might want to put him in a dark alley. Yeah. I wouldn't want to do that. Yeah.
Well, the next one on the list is actually this guy. I think is one of my all-time favorites, but it's because he was just another one of those that seems so athletically gifted and smooth as Barry Windham.
Yeah, I mean, you can't say enough good things about Barry. I mean, his work at that particular time when I was around Barry, when you say smooth, that's literally goes hand in hand with Barry Windham. His work was just, gosh, guys. I mean, you just can't. He's just another guy that if you're going to go into the ring with him, he's going to give you a little bit in the match. He's going to make you look good. He's going to beat you in the end, but he's going to make you look good a little bit too, like you beat somebody, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. So, but Barry just, his work ethic alone was just incredible. I mean, he was so smooth in the ring, but I'm just always thankful that, that I had a chance to meet his father at one point.
Wow.
Blackjack Mulligan.
That's awesome.
I never had a chance to work with Blackjack, but, growing up as a kid and seeing Blackjack, on television, that really made my day. And, when I was able to walk up to his father and say, hey, I was such a huge mark for Blackjack Mulligan when I was growing up, and I just wanted to say thanks. And
that's awesome.
But just such a great family, but two very smooth workers. But Barry and Kendall both. I mean, I never really knew Kendall that well, but I got to know Barry a little bit from his time at the Crockett's. But just what a smooth worker in the ring.
Well, you did work Kendall though. How were they? Pretty smooth, pretty similar.
Yeah, I mean, I would say. I mean, look, Kendall his talent was never as good as Barry's.
Right.
Barry was just on another different level. Kendall was good to work with, not taking anything away from Kendall, but Barry was just in a league of his own, man. He was so smooth.
And I don't want to say anything negative either, but any light about these guys, but it was like they were the tallest, leanest dudes, and they always wore the smallest trunks. It was like their thing, man. But
well, I tell you what, man, Barry, the women loved Barry back in the day.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah, I bet.
Yeah. They loved Barry back in the day.
Yeah, I believe every bit of that. Right. I know my female cousins were big fans of him. Let's just say that.
Oh yeah. I mean, what young girl didn't like a blonde-headed, blue-eyed young man? I mean, who during that time? I mean, who wouldn't love that?
Right. And he always had those awesome boots. We're big fans of Barry Windham for sure.
Absolutely.
So the next guy I'm going to bring up was actually part of that coming over from UWF, and you brought up his sometimes on again, off again lady, Missy Hyatt there, but I'd love to hear a little bit about Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert.
Yeah, Eddie was just I never really got to know Eddie too much because I don't remember what year he passed away.
Right.
But Eddie, I got to know him a little bit, just working in the locker room there a little bit, and I had a couple of matches with him, and just another. He was a guy that had such a mind for the business. Eddie had booked territories before. I think he maybe had booked down in Puerto Rico some.
Yeah.
But he had a really creative mind for the wrestling business. And just another guy that was extremely, and he was not a big guy. Eddie was he was not a big guy. But one thing that I do remember about him, he had one of the prettiest drop kicks that I had ever seen.
Yeah,
and
that's
one thing that I do remember about Eddie is that smooth drop kick of his.
Yeah, Eddie, we had to bring him up because of our Tennessee listeners, of course, but he's definitely an acolyte of Lawler. He definitely had those elements about him, but he also had his own thing about him. Jared and I often discuss, and we may even make it an episode in the future about what would he be doing had he not passed away?
Yeah,
I feel like one of the two big companies would be having him in their offices, I'm sure.
That's a great point. And, I could have easily seen him in a, kind of, and I don't know whether he was ever part of Smoky Mountain or did anything with that. I don't really remember. But since you guys have got a lot of Tennessee listeners, you can't talk about Tennessee and not talk about Nature Boy Buddy Landell.
Amen. Yeah.
There's another Tennessee guy right there who was just another smooth operator in the ring. I mean, he was just another mat technician, and if you couldn't have a good match with Buddy, well, something was wrong. But
that was your fault.
Yeah, absolutely right. Just another good Tennessee guy right there.
That's great. I'm glad you brought him up. There's a funny story. Jared, were you with me the night that I went to watch wrestling up at the Southwest Virginia Community College?
I don't remember that.
I don't think you were. Well, anyway, one night he had the main event of the match, and my buddy who I was with, he said, "Hey, do you want to go to the locker room?" And I'm like, "I don't think we need to do that. I don't think we should." He's like, "No, I work here. My dad works up here. I can go anywhere I want." I said, okay. And we go in the men's locker room, and of course, all the wrestlers are in there. And as we open the door, Buddy's standing there, and I can't tell if he has trunks on or not. He has his boots on, he has a shirt on, and that's all that it looks like he has on. And he's yelling about something, and he sees the door open, stops. He says, "Hey fellas, how y'all doing? Did you enjoy the show? Thank y'all for coming out." And we like realized we should not be in there. We closed the door, and as soon as we closed the door, he says, "Hey Tommy, I thought you said you had somebody on the door. Man, we've got guys coming in left and right." It was so funny because he was going off. He stopped when he saw us, gave us the "thank y'all for coming out," and we closed the door, and he starts going back off. Man, that was just, it was like,
his personality, I mean, there's just a guy, you can't help but love the guy. I mean, he's another one of those guys I think about all the time. I mean, he always crosses my mind periodically when I'm thinking about wrestling. But Buddy Landell was just a great human being. It's so sad that he's not with us anymore, but just another incredible talent that that I had such a good time being in the ring with him.
Absolutely, I believe that every bit. Yeah, that's awesome. I'm so glad you brought him up. Thank you.
Join me, Gene Jackson, for the Jackson Interaction Podcast, where I'll be doing one-on-one interviews with people from the world of professional wrestling, as well as stand-up comedy. You can get them anywhere podcasts are available in both video and audio form, but you can find them all at GeneJacksonPod.com.
Hey, it's the Heat Miser Scotty Blaze. Now I'm inviting all of y'all to join me on my brand new podcast, Turning Up the Heat with the Heat Miser Scotty Blaze. So what are you waiting for? Come on over and join me. I'll be covering all the events of the day, global, national, pop culture, movies, gaming, whatever sounds interesting. But I'll also be playing some awesome skating shuffle music from the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s. Anything that has a good beat, I'm going to be playing it. You can rest assured. Come on over, TUTHradio.com. The podcast is on every major podcast platform. See you then.
All right, this guy right here is one of the, I mean, I'd have to go and look through all our lists, but he's one of the few guys that's actually still doing it. But Sting.
I had an opportunity to work with Sting when he first came to Crockett, and I think he may have come over from the UWF at that time. Yeah. And, back when Steve was doing the surfer type of Sting.
Right.
With the flat top and the blonde hair and all that. I got along with Sting exceptionally well because, a lot of times back in those days, I had a what's the word I'm looking for? I drove fast in my car. So, people knew that I could get back to Charlotte. Charlotte pretty quickly. And, Sting, I remember a couple of times we were wrestling down here in Greenville and we were going back to Charlotte. And he said, "Isley, how quick can you get us back to Charlotte?" And I said, "Hey, what's going on?" He said, "Well, if you wait on me," he said, "we'll go over to Whispers Night Lounge and, they're having a bikini contest tonight. Let's see if we can make it." And so I had the gas pedal down and got us back just in time. But, I always thought the world of him. And gosh, guys, I don't see how he's able to still do it. But,
man, seriously.
But I read somewhere he's going to be wrapping it up pretty soon, and good for him because
in February or March, I think.
He's been doing it an awful long time.
Exactly. Yeah, no, we're big fans of Sting, no doubt. But it's funny, I just got to ask that question: how quickly did you make it from Greenville to Charlotte?
I remember ordinarily it would take about back in those days it would take us about an hour and a half to get back, and I think I shaved probably 20 or 25 minutes off at that particular time because guys, you got to remember back in those days, even the underneath guys on television, we were on television every week. So
right.
The cops knew us when they pulled us, and I'm not going to say we used it to our advantage, but certainly sometimes when we got pulled for speeding, a lot of times we were able to talk ourselves out of it. And that type of thing. So I didn't mind speeding back in those days because I knew as soon as I got into Mecklenburg County that I'd be okay, because if we did get in trouble, all we had to do was call Doug Dellinger and he'd tell us how to get out of trouble.
Yeah.
Right.
I was going to say that, like, my wallet's down in my wrestling boots here. Hold on.
Right. Exactly.
Oh, there's my title. There's my tights. Hold on.
Oh, here's Sting sitting right next to me.
Oh yeah,
that's right.
Sting.
Exactly right. Sure. So we were all able to get out of some things here in those days.
That's awesome.
Right. I
love that. Okay, well, the last guy I'm going to talk about for just a second is Dr. Death Steve Williams.
Yeah, old Doc, man. I got to know Doc pretty well in Japan.
Yeah.
Terry and Doc, the tag team they had over there was just unbelievable. I mean, Doc was so incredibly strong. I know that I was in Japan and I was actually tagging with Doc one night. We were against Abdullah and Giant Kamala '2, and that guy's name was Ben Peacock out of Georgia, and Doc said, I'm getting ready to light him up. And I remember Abby had his back towards Doc. Doc picked up a metal chair and just blasted Abby with it in the back of in his back with that chair. And, Abby could be a little, how can I say this? I remember, and I don't want to get off topic too much, but I remember in that match with Doc, Abby shot me in the rope. He shot me in the rope and I came off, and he gave me a chop in the head. And on the way, as I was taking my bump on the way down, he had gigged me with his blade so quick that my head was bleeding on the way down.
Wow.
He did it so fast. But I seen Doc pick up Abby for a slam and like it was a sack of potatoes, just like
wow.
Yeah. So he was incredibly strong. But just what a sweetheart of a guy. Him and Bam both were just such a sweetheart of a guy.
What a devastating tag team, though.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Those guys were in Japan were over like I've never seen. Doc and Cordy were on top for quite some time over there.
Oh, yeah. Well, so we made it into 1988. And of course, we talked a little bit about it, and you did make it up to the WWF. And Tommy actually told us, Nelson advised you guys, hey, it's a good opportunity. You may be burning a bridge with Crockett, though, and so you make it up to WWF. Was that essentially like a no-brainer, though, even though you were concerned about burning a bridge, maybe?
Yeah, at that particular time, we were ready to venture out a little bit and try some other things. Jimmy Crockett I know Jimmy contacted Gene Anderson, and he was very upset that we had gone to WWF, and he had suggested that Gene, fire us and not book us anymore for television. He said, Jimmy, why do you want to do that? He said, if you let these guys go, who are you going to have to work your televisions?
Right.
So it was one of those cases where I can't say enough positive things about McMahon and the way he was running his business up there at that particular time. Just he treated us well. He took care of us. He paid us well. He fed us well. He put us up in a nice hotel. He paid for our rent-a-cars, our airfare up there and back. What was there not to enjoy about that time when we felt like, we were working for Crockett? I don't mean this in a bad way, but they just didn't treat us very well down there. They didn't. They didn't appreciate what we did. They didn't appreciate our value. But I can tell you, they actually appreciated us very much when we went to WWF.
Yeah, I bet. So, we asked Tommy about this, but what would you say were some of the immediate differences in Crockett and WWF at that time?
The immediate thing that I saw right off the bat was just how it was professionally ran.
Yeah.
Just the, it's like you've got everything's, you're not flying by the seat of your pants. Everything was like very well put together. The business was put together. The matches were put together. They had a board out, who was working with everybody, the lineups for television. The road agents were all in touch with everybody. It was just a whole And something else I can say is when we got there, they had a complete buffet ready for us.
I was going to say catering, the existence of catering.
Yeah, right. Catering was there, and we never had that with Crockett.
Right.
I mean, it just didn't happen. So I think just the way they valued their employees was so much better at the WWF than it was for Crockett.
Gotcha. And I think it probably shows in the long run why one is still around and unfortunately one isn't, That's
absolutely correct.
As much as I would
point.
At that time, Crockett was the tops. And if you asked me with a gun to my head, I would still say Jim Crockett Promotions is my favorite. But there's a certain element of professionalism. It's like going to work for Coca-Cola when you'd been working for like RC Coca-Cola, or something,
Perfect comparison right there. It's night and day. Night and day.
Yeah.
How about another Road Warriors-esque team? How about the Demolition?
Barry Darso and Bill Eadie. I'm going to tell you now, working with Bill. Bill, to me, Bill was always a snug wrestler anyway.
Yeah.
And a lot of this people don't actually know about Bill is he was one of the Mongols back in the IWA.
Right.
As Bolo and Guido Mongol. And I did not know that at the time, but I'm going to tell you, Demolition was a snug tag team.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, when Bill worked as the Masked Superstar down here in the Crockett territory, he worked so much snugger and I don't know why, as the Superstar versus Demolition. But again, Barry Darso, another guy from the Minneapolis territory out of Eddie Sharkey's group up there, just another super good guy.
That's awesome.
That I always enjoyed working with. But they were a strong over tag team back when I was there working with those guys. Just a very, very solid tag team.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I mean, I'll always ask this question again. We talked about the Powers of Pain versus the Road Warriors, but when it comes down to it, the Demolition, even though they looked and had that similar Road Warrior movie based gimmick, how it did come across as two totally different tag teams when they were in the ring. Hawk and Animal were more like shock and awe, and Demolition it just seemed like they maybe were a little more work with you and a little more. I don't want to say better tag team. I don't mean that actually, but it's like they just seemed like they had a different style about them.
Almost more workers.
Yeah, there was a different style between those guys, and even Barry, when Barry worked down here for the Crockett's as Crusher Khrushchev.
Right.
Just another type of character that he played down here, but I think Barry really got over well as Demolition. I think that's really where he kind of cemented his legacy, is when he became part of the Demolition tag team.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the next team I want to bring up, and it's funny that I keep bringing up teams here, but when it comes down to it, I recently interviewed a good buddy of mine from Virginia, Boris Zukov. He actually worked the Bolsheviks, him and Nikolai. Talk about working with them.
Yeah, that was the only time that I ever got to work with those guys. But I remember, two guys that were extremely light to work with in the ring. I remember the match very clearly because it was, like I said, the only time I ever worked with them. But hey, two legendary guys, part of the business, two legendary guys that just really, cemented their legacy. I remember Boris Zukov when he was Private Jim Nelson down there.
Yeah, exactly.
With Slaughter and Kernodle. That's really how I remember him, because you guys got to understand, I was a Mid-Atlantic guy. I never really saw too much of the, even though cable was around during that time, I still remembered for all intents and purposes, not to get off the subject, but even after Big Bubba Rogers, Ray Traylor left and went to work as the big boss man for the WWF, I still associated with him as Big Bubba Rogers.
Me too. We did too.
And I still called him Bubba even when he was working for the McMahons. And but two smooth guys, Nikolai and when you can make your matches look believable, like those two guys, the Bolsheviks, when you can make your matches look so believable and you're that big, I mean, that's just an art. That's a talent. It's
Amen.
A talent.
That's awesome. Yeah. So, you're doing the back and forth with Crockett and the WWF, and you actually come back to NWA, and you end up working some other guys like the Varsity Club, and we've talked about them there. But one of the guys that we've got to talk about, because he means so much, especially to our Tennessee people, is Chris Champion. You had worked with him with Sean Royal in the New Breed, but here you actually worked him solo, and I think this was after Sean had left the business, maybe.
I worked with Chris Champion when he was around as the Karate Kid, and I also worked with those guys when they were the New Breed. Matter of fact, when they had their car accident, I was at the match that night when they had their car accident. They didn't show up, and we didn't know why, what had happened to them. But a quick story about Chris Champion is, he had a finish when he was, he did that little move where he kicked you underneath your jaw.
Yeah.
When he kind of like that Karate Kid type of gimmick.
Right.
And he practiced it on me in the back a couple of times, but when we got on television, he kicked me so hard.
Man.
That he split my lip from one side to the other. And I know it was an accident. I know it was an accident. I know he didn't mean to do it. But I remember, if you watch the match, I remember where it was taped. It was taped in Fayetteville, North Carolina.
Okay.
And I remember because back then in the Fayetteville Cumberland County Auditorium, the Hills and the Baby Faces, we did not have dressing rooms together. They were on separate sides. So all we had were walkie-talkies to talk to each other back and forth. And so Chris had split me open, and he knew when he kicked me, he knew that it really split me open. And you can actually hear him when he covers me, you can hear him say, sorry. And so when we got back to the back, my lip was just pouring blood. And as soon as I walked through the back, Flair was on the headset, and his eyes got like big as golf balls, and he took his headset off. He said, "Who in the hell did that?" And I said, I was working with Chris Champion. And so he got on the mic and he told Chris Champion, says, "Please don't do that again. If you can't do that move correctly, don't be killing these guys." He said, "We've got so many guys that are hurt right now. We can't afford to be missing these too many more of the underneath guys. We're not going to have anybody to work with on television."
Right.
So Flair took $100 bill, and you're going back to 1980, 87, 88, whatever it was. Flair took $100 bill out of his wallet and said, "Make sure you go by the hospital on the way home and get that stitched up." And I'll never forget that. Never forget it.
I would have probably just said, "I'll do it myself," and frame that 100 from Flair. But I get what you're saying. Right. I know you knew Flair.
Absolutely correct. But again, good guy to work with, Chris Champion. I know he didn't mean to do it, but just one of those unfortunate things that happens in the ring.
Recently I saw a video of him working Steiner, and it was a tag match, and I think he caught Steiner with that as well. And Rick came back pretty quick. Ate him up real quick. And no disrespect. I don't want to kick David Isley. Please don't think I want to kick you, but I think if I'm going to choose, I'm not going to stiff Rick Steiner. Yeah.
No, I remember seeing. You're right. I remember seeing that match as well, and he did. He really potatoed him pretty hard with that kick, and I know Steiner kind of lost his cool a little bit.
Well, I mean, and that move has to be kind of hard to control almost, with all the momentum of your foot coming up,
Well, the momentum of the foot, plus you got all the adrenaline going through you. It's hard to capture all that.
Yeah, no doubt.
You were talking about the Eddie Sharkey guys from Minnesota earlier, so we can't leave this guy out. How about Rick Rude?
I tell you, man, Rick was he was a beast. I remember one night working with him down in Rock Hill, South Carolina, and he hit me so hard with an elbow to the side of the head that it punctured my eardrum.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I remember the match, and you can watch it, and I'm kind of staggering a little bit because I had lost my equilibrium. And he got back to the back, and he said, "Why wouldn't you sell for me?" I said, "Rick, I didn't even know where I was at."
Yeah.
I said, "You hit me so hard with that elbow, I lost my balance, and at that particular time, I didn't realize that I had punctured my eardrum. But when I got back to the back and the water from the shower had got down in my ear, I mean, it was like excruciating pain. So that's when I went to see my ear, nose, and throat doctor, and he said, "You got a little small gap in your eardrum." He said, "Just keep it dry for a couple of weeks, and it'll heal by itself." But man, what a strong man he was. I mean, he was. Yeah. He was. Yeah, I always heard how, he was a legitimate bad guy outside. He's not some guy you wanted to pick a fight with.
Right.
But I never saw that side. I just heard the stories.
But that's a good thing, I guess. Yeah. So
and he's kind of got that. He's kind of got that lean look that you like. Some guys probably at a bar probably thought they could take him.
Oh yeah. Well, and Root is a guy also, my understanding, he was a champion arm wrestler.
Yeah. Absolutely. I've heard that.
I think that's what I heard. Yeah.
Well, the next guy, and we've actually had several guys on the show that have worked Ted, and I'm going to bring this up. Ben Jordan, one of our favorite former guests, one of my good buddies, he actually did some work down in Global and Memphis and stuff, but Ben actually worked in a tag match against Money Incorporated, and one of the things that he made a joke about was that he was sad that when Ted DiBiase and IRS beat him, he did not get the $100 crammed in his mouth. So now, of course, Tommy Angel popped that balloon and said, well, you didn't get to keep the money anyway. But talk about working Ted and maybe if you got to keep the $100 bill.
No, I did not get to keep the $100. I remember that pretty clearly. And, but what? I'll tell you a quick story, and I have since told Ted this story, some time ago, but Ted did not know me from anybody. I mean, when he's worked with a lot of guys on the, on television, he would ask them, can you take this move? Can you take that move? And they'll say, oh yeah, I can do it. But when you get out of the ring and you do it, they can't do it.
Right.
So I remember Ted asking me, he said, David, can you take a standing suplex? And I said, well, of course. What kind of question is that? He said, look, man, I don't know you from Adam. He said, I'm just asking the question because a lot of guys tell me they can do things, but when we get out there in the ring, they can't do it. And so he said, well, who trained you? And I said, Nelson Royal and Gene Anderson. He said, oh, you're good. I know you can. Right. So that's what I distinctly remember about that match. But, I remember the bump that I took for him. I landed on the floor. I mean, I remember it vague. I remember it very clearly. Knocking the breath out of me. Yeah.
I recently saw that match. Yeah.
It knocked the breath out of me for sure.
Yeah. And that's brutal because you're already worrying about staying winded, and then Ted could probably blow you up if he wanted to. And then the fact that you lose your breath in this massive bump, man, that must be a little frightening, right?
It definitely was. Looking back, I would have taken it so much different, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I understand.
All right, so this next guy, he is always mentioned as one of the legit tough guys in the business, maybe the most legit tough guy, Haku.
Yeah, I remember working with Haku on a TV match up there, and I remember very clearly, of course, his finish was with the foot to the side of the face. And I remember it was just it caught me a little bit on my lip, but for the most part, that move was extremely smooth. Extremely smooth. Yeah. I don't remember too much about the match. I just remember the finish. But I just remember his finish just being so smooth. But I remember coming back from Japan one time, and he was on the plane. He was working for a different office than I was, and he was on the plane, and we had a chance to catch up for a few minutes. And it's funny how you can always, you're on a plane, and you can always spot a wrestler, coming from Japan. So we had a chance to catch up for a few minutes and talk. And but what another great guy. I mean, he was so smooth in the ring, but really could hurt you if he wanted to.
Yeah.
They say, I mean, everything I've ever heard about him is like he must have been like jerks would seek him out in the bars. It's like, I don't know why you would seek out a 300+ pound guy like that. I just don't know that.
He's the guy that I've heard, has legitimately bitten the nose off of a man's face.
Cool.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Man, he
No
just
thanks.
does. Yeah, no kidding. Well, you kind of end up starting to you had worked back and forth with Crockett and WWF, and you worked a lot of similar faces and had some great matches with these guys. But then you start to work actually some of the indies in the Carolina region, starting off first with Nelson Royal's Atlantic Coast Wrestling. Yeah. And I got to say this, I recently, having Tommy Angel on, doing the research for his show, I found all these matches online, and it's actually dinged a bell in my brain that my brother and I saw the ACW in Council, Virginia. It's one of our very first indie shows. Now, I guess what brought you to start with Tommy, and was it the idea that you were going to get a little more of a tit for tat in a match?
So what Nelson, that's the particular time that Nelson had recently sold out to TBS. I'm sorry, that Crockett had sold out to TBS.
Got it. Okay.
So that territory type of wrestling was getting ready to go away. The territories were not going to be really around too much. And Nelson saw this as an opportunity maybe to get something started and on a regional level. And, he had a lot of the guys and he needed some guys to come in. So, we were able to bring in guys like, Don Kernodle, Doug Summers, Jimmy Garvin, one of the,
Rock and Roll, Robert and
Rock
Ricky.
and Roll, Armstrong. So we had some good names come through there, and and it just really did not catch on like we really thought it was going to. It was just one of those things that I think if we had more TV exposure, more TV time, to get our product out there. But I think from our standpoint, from where we sat, it was just an opportunity maybe to take a gamble on something on our talent and get out there and maybe start a territory. And that's really what we looked at it as, is finally maybe we were going to start getting our own push. We had paid our dues, and it was time for us to do a little something extra. And that's kind of how we viewed it, was starting a new regional territory.
Yeah, well, if y'all out there listening, go to Carolina Wrestling Archive on YouTube, and this one is a hidden gem, and I was so glad that I found it, because the matches and the show, it reminded you and it gave you that feel of Crockett, but it was also something different. You saw all the similar faces, but you guys were getting good matches. You were getting to show Rick Nelson, Tommy Angel, all these guys, even the Barbarian's legit brother,
Right, John Savage.
Yeah, and you could see so many of these great guys, and it's a hidden gem, and I highly recommend everyone to go check out the Atlantic Coast Wrestling for sure. So, and then that leads you into working for Frank Dusek and Paul Jones with their North American Wrestling Association, which is it's very similar to Nelson's promotion, but you got to work guys like Bob Orton Jr., Matt Bourne, Brandy Colley, Tatanka, Chris Chavez early on. But some of the guys I definitely want to ask you about, like Brad Anderson. I think that guy needs some shine. Yeah,
Brad was also he had worked some and coming through Nelson's camp, and they used him on some TVs with a mask on. I believe his name back at that time might have been Dan Panzer.
I think so. Yep.
Yeah. But Brad was another, he was a legitimate Anderson, tough kid in the ring. He was one of those guys that his dad taught him the old school way, and that's how he worked. And but yeah, Brad was just another sweetheart of a guy, and I always got along exceptionally well with Brad. We all came from the same camp, so we all had a real strong bond with each other, and. Can't say enough positive things about Brad.
Yeah, and it was from what I've been able to find, another great promotion to watch. I definitely highly recommend people look that up as well. But how was it working guys like Bob Orton Jr. and Matt Bourne?
Yeah, I loved working with Matt Bourne. With Bob, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Bob may have been tagging with the guy who ended up being Papa Shango.
Yeah. Okay.
Charles Wright. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
And I think he was down there and worked a few shows, but again, it was one of these situations where George Scott had brought in some guys like Robert Fuller and Jimmy Gold and the Nasty Boys, who I still remain very close with, and So I thoroughly enjoyed working with those guys, but I remember working with Bob Orton on television, and he really didn't know me that well, so I really didn't get a whole lot during the match. But I didn't stay there too long.
Right.
I told Paul, I remember telling Paul Jones, I said, "Hey, Paul, I enjoy working for you, but I'm going to go out and do some other things. I don't really want to do TVs for you anymore."
Right.
He understood. He just didn't have a spot there for me at that particular time. So that's kind of what led me to kind of do a few things with them, and then off I went doing some other things after that.
Yeah, and I mean, mainly like, some of the names you got to also work during that time. Colt Steele, who you brought up earlier.
Oh, yeah.
And then Chris Chavez, which is now Tatanka. Yeah. Everybody knows him. Jerry Price. Yeah. And then in August of 1990, NAWA changes their name to South Atlantic Pro Wrestling. So, there's some name changes, and then that's when you meet up with the Nasty Boys, and then Tex Salinger, which a lot of our Memphis listeners will know about, and, of course, WWF listeners will know about as well when he was, Midian. But you got to work some great guys there, and I love talking about the Carolina Indies as much as I do talking about the others, so.
Well, that's a great point, because a lot of your talent that went on to the WWF, even like a Vince Torelli, who was Ken Shamrock. Mm-hmm. He was also another guy that came through during that time that Paul Jones managed.
Gotcha.
And Kenny went on to become, Ultimate Fighting, and also the world's most dangerous man up in the WWF. So, and of course, Chris Chavis over to Tatanka. So, I had a lot of opportunity to work with a lot of great guys. I've been very blessed in my career. I can't say thanks enough for the time that I had in the business. I got to work with a lot of legends in this business.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, in 1991, you started kind of working back with WCW and WWF, and you get to work one of the all-time greats, and I think probably the best gimmick of all time in The Undertaker.
Yeah, that was a fun match. When I went up there to work with The Undertaker, after the match, I remember him because again, they had a lot of underneath guys on television up there who said they could work, and they just couldn't. And so I remember after the match, Mark came up and we were talking after the match, and he asked me who trained me, and I told him a little bit about my career. He said, "Man, I really appreciate he said everything I did with you just flowed smoothly. Everything worked out very well. You followed my lead. Whatever I needed, you were right there for me. It was perfect timing." So he was extremely happy after the match. I was as well, because I left in one piece and got paid. So, I had a chance to work with The Undertaker. So that was a real highlight for me.
Now, did you have issues with the coffee grounds like Tommy did?
I did not. I did not have that problem. That was one thing I did not have a problem. Now I don't remember where, I don't think he did. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know whether, I wasn't a big fan of the way they would zip you up in that.
Yeah.
After the match. I'm a little claustrophobic, so I don't know whether that would have been the best thing for me. But anyway.
Yeah. So, you did work for the WCW and WWF again. Did that just kind of say, okay, look, the indies were the indies and that was fun, but I need to start making some money again? Is that kind of where your thoughts were on that? I really started more into the indie scene after, I'm going to say probably in the early 90s, probably around 92-ish, 93-ish. Right.
I went back to WCW after Crockett had sold it. And guys, I'm going to be very transparent with you why I left. I was tagging. I had been going back for some matches. Jody Hamilton, who was doing the underneath talent booking, he would call me up, and and it seemed like I had several good matches there. I didn't have to worry about getting hurt, but it seemed like for the last 3 or 4 times that Jody called me, I was either in a singles match or a tag match with Sid Vicious. And And I'll be honest with you, I did not enjoy working with Sid at that time. Nothing personal against him. I just did not enjoy working with him because I wasn't sure if I would go home in one piece.
Okay.
So finally, I told Jody Hamilton when he called me, I said, Jody, look, you guys have put me in the ring with Sid either in a 6-man or a singles or a tag team the last 3 or 4 times I've been there. I said, I don't, I'm worried if I'm going to get hurt or not. So if you're gonna put me in the ring with Sid again, just tell me now, and I won't come.
Right.
And so he understood, and he said, no, don't worry about it. I said, okay. So I didn't care, really at that point. I didn't care if I really went back or not because I had enough independent work, working the Indies and the Carolinas. I had a chance to work, that's about the point in time when I started doing the Thunderfoot gimmick after that. So,
right.
That kind of led into that. So after Gene Liggett and I started doing the Thunderfoot gimmick in the early 90s, I really didn't care if I went back to WCW or not.
Yeah. And before we get to the Thunderfoot, I got to ask you now, were you aware of the time frame when this happened of Mike Blackwell and Avalanche versus Dan Spivey and Sid, where the guy would not sell at all? This was Mike Blackwell.
I didn't find out about that till later on.
Gotcha.
I don't believe I was there around that. I may have been in, doing some shows for him. I was not at that show. I heard about it, but I was not present there when that was filmed.
I can't believe that guy would ever think he could anyway. I say that with the ultimate respect of both men, but especially Dan Spivey, who I've heard is definitely not one man you want to mess with. So
no, I was in Japan with Danny, and which I knew him from Charlotte anyway, back from early on in the Crockett days.
Right.
Yeah, he's not a guy you want to poke.
No, not a bit. And now, the reason I brought this up, and you brought him up earlier talking about getting to meet him and stuff, but you actually talk about, meeting Stan Hansen, and you got to work Stan Hansen. How was it working?
Stan and I are, matter of fact, I just got a text message from him while we were doing this podcast. And, we keep in touch on a very, very regular basis. And, but I'm going to tell you, and I've told Stan before, he was stiff. He was stiff, and if you read Stan's book,
it's a great book. Great.
He'll tell you about, he talks some stories about me in there. And, we were actually getting ready to go out, and we were working with each other in a match one night, and his music hit, and he says, Isley, I'm sorry about the potatoes. I said, what potatoes? He goes, the ones I'm getting ready to give you.
Oh, man.
So he apologized up front, and he was extremely, extremely stiff. And but that was just his style. He didn't mind taking it, but he sure didn't mind giving it either.
Did you take the lariat?
I did. I've taken that lariat quite a few times, and it's anybody that says wrestling is fake, well, I didn't get the memo that night.
Right. Incredible. That's incredible. Yeah. Well, so you brought it up a minute ago, but we're going to officially lead into it now. So in 92, you actually make your way to All Japan, which, for any wrestler, I think Japan has got to be one of those bucket list deals, right? What was your connection? I know you went with Tommy and stuff, but talk about your connection to All Japan and how you got there.
That's honestly, I was a friend of mine named Sal Correnti, who has been in the business for a long time. He was actually Nelson Royal's main referee at that particular time. I knew Sal because he and Nikita Koloff were very good friends. He had booked a tour down to Bermuda, and it was myself, Gene Liggett. There were a couple of midgets on the card. Ivan Koloff was there. JYD was there.
Yeah.
So Junkyard Dog and I were actually sitting out by the pool, having a drink together. And he said, "Hey kid," he says, "I don't know a whole lot about you." He said, "But I saw your work out there tonight, and you look pretty good." He said, "Have you ever thought about going to Japan?" And I said, "Dog, that's hard to get in. I mean, there's so many people trying to go to Japan, and I don't know how to get in over there." he said, "Do you know Stan Hansen?" And I said, "I don't know Stan." And he said, "Well, you put a VHS of put some matches together for him and send him a letter, mention my name, and tell him to give you a chance that, that I recommend you." So that's how I got, I sent Stan my information and he got it. 3 or 4 months went by and he finally called me, and Stan and I were talking on the phone, and he said, "Okay, well, I want to book you over here for the April Champion Carnival Tour." And he said, "But now, while I've got you on the phone," he said, "if you got any more of Nelson's guys that you can recommend, because, we're looking for some different talent to bring them over here." I said, Sure. So I mentioned Tommy Angel and Ricky Nelson. So that's kind of how we were all able to get that started and go over there. But, the friendship Stan and I have today is just a wonderful, wonderful friendship that we have together. I've spent time with him at his home in Colorado, and he was recently here for a few days up in the West Virginia area doing some events, and down in Charlotte with High Spots. And he and I were able to spend 3 or 4 days on the road together. So that's how that whole thing led, with me going to Japan. And Stan and I tell each other all the time, if it wasn't for JYD, he and I would have never been friends.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's incredible. Well, Jarrett, start us off. We got a little name game for the All Japan guys here. So go ahead, Jarrett.
So when you talk about Japanese wrestling, if you don't bring this guy up, you're missing out. Giant Baba.
Yeah, Giant Baba. Baba came over back into when I was going through camp. Baba had brought over some guys from Japan to work in the Coliseum one night in Charlotte, and that's where I originally met Baba, because I worked out with some of his guys in the ring when Nelson brought him over here and for Crockett. And I tell you a funny story is. The first night I was in Japan, I was in a 6-man tag with Joel Deaton and Abdullah the Butcher against Baba, Rusher Kimura, and I don't remember the third gentleman. But Abdullah did not know me from anybody else. He thought I was some green kid and didn't know what I was doing. But anybody that knows Baba knows that his chop was very, very over. That's what he was well known for, was those big hands of his. So Baba slung me into the rope, and he called out Big Chop. So when he calls Big Chop, I knew that I better sell it.
Right.
So Abdullah, when he heard Baba say Big Chop, he screamed at the top of his lungs, "Kid, please go off your feet," because he wanted to make sure that I sold the move for Baba, because that's what he was so famous for. Now, it didn't look great.
Right.
But you still better sell the boss's chop.
Right.
That's what you better. Yeah. So that's just the way it did. So I sold it like $1 million.
Yeah, I bet. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, again, there's some of these legendary Japan names, and you got to work a lot of them here, but one of them is Kenta Kobashi.
Kobashi, yeah. Kobashi was another guy that, the Japanese talent, they are just so talented. I mean,
right.
But Kobashi is just another one of those legends in Japan that I'm so thankful that I had the opportunity to work with. Probably the only Japanese guy that I regret not being able to work with was probably Masawa.
Right.
And I wish that I had an opportunity to work with him, but I didn't. But I had an opportunity to work with most everybody else on the tour on the Japanese side.
Yeah.
So I was very thankful for that. And I guess, which you're probably going to lead into in a minute anyway, but I guess if I had to say one Japanese guy that I'm so thankful that I had the opportunity to work with, was probably Jumbo Tsuruta.
Boom! I wanted to hit the drum roll.
Yeah. He's the guy that I can say, hey, my career, I made it. If I was able to have a match with Jumbo, and he was able to speak English and that kind of thing, so we were able to go out there and have a good solid match, and I'm just so blessed that I was able to work with him during my career.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you end up, you worked a lot of times. Was there any interesting Japanese stories that came about during your time there?
Well, what I will say is I've got a funny Terry Gordy story, and and Stan may talk about this in his book a little bit, but I had been on tour there. I had been gone for about 3 weeks, and I was ready to go home. Like everybody else, get a little homesick for the food and that kind of thing. So Terry was down in the hotel eating breakfast that morning, and he knew I was tired of the food. And he told me, he saw me, I came down, sat downstairs with him. He said, "David, you're not going to believe this." I said, "What?" He said, "That chef back in the back, that cook, he's from the States, and he knows how to cook, bacon and eggs, and he even made me some biscuits." I said, "Do what?" And I said, he said, "I'm not kidding you. It's some of the best I ever had." He said, "Do you want to try it?" And I said, "Absolutely." And so he calls the waitress over and told her in Japanese, that I wanted to have the same thing that he was eating. And he got up and he said, he's "Enjoy that breakfast." He said, "I'll see you back at the bus in a few minutes." And so when she brought my food out, it was salad and fish.
Oh my man!
Gosh. So I knew right then that he had ribbed me. And,
brother!
So as soon as I got on the bus, he sat in the very back of the bus and he looked at me and just laid on the floor dying laughing. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Where's the biscuits and gravy?
That's one thing that I really remember is just the story of Terry Gordy. Just one thing that I'll never forget.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about working for Herb Abrams, UWF. I see you got guys like Jimmy Valiant and Sonny Beach.
I still keep in touch with Sonny Beach quite a bit. He lives up in the New York area, and he and I keep in touch pretty well. Herb had a few shows down in the Carolinas, I think, if I remember correctly, and we were able to go in there and do a few little spot shows with him, and nothing on a real regular basis. But one good thing that we always had was anytime a major promotion came to your area and they needed some talent, they always knew they felt like they could call Nelson or they could call us, say, "Hey, do you want to come do this event for us? We're going to be in your area. We're going to be there for a couple of days. Can you help us out? Blah, blah, blah." Yeah, we were always very eager to oblige if we weren't doing something else. So, I don't remember a whole lot about, the UWF. I know that, did they not do some, was there not a show on that some time ago?
Dark Side of the Ring.
Dark Side of the Ring. Yeah. Right.
It's really brought them back into focus too. Our buddy Gene Jackson has a whole podcast about the UWF. So yeah,
I worked under a hood, but I don't remember what they called me.
Okay, gotcha.
I don't remember what they called me. Just like the same thing I did working for Smoky Mountain Wrestling. I went in to do a few things with Cornette back in the day.
Right.
I worked as I remember he stuck a hood on me one night as the Mighty Yankee.
Yes, and that was one of those Tennessee gimmicks. Yeah, I love it.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely correct. So guys, I've been very, very, very fortunate. From the time that I started until the time I got out, I had a lot of really good opportunities to work around a lot of legends, and I'm just so thankful that it was a good career.
No doubt. And it's been incredible for you, for sure. I've enjoyed every bit of this. So we've got just a little bit more before we wrap it up.
Yeah, sure.
You did come back, and in 94, you put the pedal down on the Thunderfoot gimmick. You and Gene are working it also. Yeah. But you had just recently worked in Japan. You talked about working some with Joel Deaton. So was there a tie-in with Joel, Thunderfoot, you, Gene? Talk about how you took the Thunderfoot gimmick.
I'll be honest with you. When we were Sal Correnti and Rob Russin from the IWA, that was back in 91. They were getting ready to, and I'm giving you a quick story on how the Thunderfoot with me got started.
Yeah.
So what happened was, I think they had reached out to Joel to do the Thunderfoot with because they were booking a tour to Sydney, Australia for a month.
Okay.
For some reason, Joel was not either able to do it or his health was bad or something. So they needed a Thunderfoot tag team partner. So I know that Sal and Gene Ligon, I did not know Rob Russin at all from the IWA. So
Got it.
Gene and Sal went to bat for me and said, "Hey, I think this would be a great alternate to Joel Deaton. I think Isley would do a heck of a job." And then after I got over there and after the tour was over, Rob came up to me and said, any tour that I have going forward, you'll be included on it. So
nice.
We just had a great experience. So Gene and I already knew each other from the Carolinas anyway.
Right.
So we really just meshed well. We traveled together. We did the Thunderfoot after Joel was not able to do it. And he and I, that to me, that's probably some of the best work that I ever did that nobody really ever got to see. Was when Gene and I were doing the Thunderfoot. That was probably some of the best stuff we did.
That's awesome. Y'all go look that up for sure. So, and working IWA as Thunderfoot, you got to work guys like Rick Link, and we talked about this guy earlier, Gary Royal, and you even worked with Afa from the legendary Samoans. Man, that was some crazy stuff there. Talk about some of those guys.
Yeah, Sal was very close with Afa. That's how he got started in the business. He was very close with Afa, so I was able to go up there, and do some things as myself. But I also, did the Thunderfoot gimmick, down here in the Carolinas. Was able to work with Rick Link and work with a lot of the other guys that get forgotten about a lot of the times that came through the Carolinas on the independent scene before they got their break. Was the guys Men on a Mission from the WWF.
Right.
I had an opportunity to work with those guys on some shows, Mabel and Bobby Horn. So, I was, again, the Thunderfoot, it was just, I loved being the heel. I really did. Looking back, I would much rather have been a heel than I was a babyface.
Right.
I felt like I was able to do more and bring more of my character out as a heel versus the babyface.
Right.
But looking back, I did not enjoy working babyface. After I became a heel, that's all I wanted to do. Now I will tell you on that tour to Australia, probably the best match of my career that I ever had was over there as Thunderfoot, working with Paul Orndorff. I mean, that was probably the best match of my career that nobody will ever get to see. And I tell everybody after that match, I probably should have quit the business at that particular time because that was my best match and that I'll never be able to see it. I don't know where the tapes are. Don't know if anybody has them, but man, I would love to see it.
Yeah, no joke. I didn't see any of that in my research, man, but I tell you, that's intrigued me now. Wow.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So 96, you start working the Carolina Indies, CCW, ACW, I think NDW. And then you actually worked for a promotion called WWE, World Wrestling Empire. Talk about working all those promotions. And here's some of the guys you got to work too. Billy Kidman, David Jericho, who led on to being Kid Cash, and Bobby Fulton. A lot of great guys. Anyway.
Back in those times, back in those days, we had, again, I had been around the business for about 10 years at that particular time. And, we had a chance to really, when Chris Plano was booking for NDW, or when he was running NDW, Rick Link was helping him out quite a bit with that. And, CCW down in Concord, we ran Saturday night in Concord every Saturday night, probably for several years. And that was a nice time because we all lived in the Concord area. The money was good. We were right there. We didn't have any traffic. I mean, for goodness sakes, we could leave our house. We could leave our house at 6:45 p.m. and be at the arena in 15 minutes. And that, I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. So we were able to work every Saturday night for several years down in Concord. So, I stayed busy on the independent scene on Saturday nights. I stayed pretty busy during those times, but I started kind of winding my career down a little bit about that time.
Yeah.
I knew there were some other things outside of wrestling that I wanted to do. So I was still just kind of doing it on a part-time basis at that particular time. And, I had an opportunity to work on many, many different little promotions around. I remember that, I'm trying to remember, Gene and I even became the Virginia Tag Team Champions one time, and I'm trying to remember that promotion that I worked with. It might have been, it could have been, Dave Parsons maybe up in the Virginia area, or I don't really remember, but I've got a picture maybe around here somewhere when Gene and I won the Virginia tag team titles back in the day.
Yeah.
And
nice.
Just had a fantastic time working as the Thunderfoots with Gene. I mean, that was just an incredible time in my career.
Yeah, no doubt. That's awesome. Well, okay, so in September 10th, 2005, it shows that there was a match versus Hack Myers at Wrestle Reunion 3. Was that your official last match?
Probably the worst match of my career, to be honest with you.
Wow. Okay.
I did not. That was my last. That was my official last match. Yes, and
Yeah.
I had worked on that show, and I didn't know Hack very well at all. His
Right.
style and my style just did not mesh well, and that happens sometimes. That happens when you work with some guys. You either mesh really well or you don't.
Right.
And our styles just did not mesh well for whatever reason. I'm not knocking his work at all. It's just our styles just did not do well. And
Right.
and I knew after that match, I said, this is probably going to be my last match, because I had started doing some other things with my career outside of wrestling, and I really just kind of wanted to focus on that a little bit more, and that's kind of what I did. But technically, that was pretty much my last, that was a match that Sal Correnti had booked for Wrestle Reunion. But I will say on that on that card, I knew that was going to be my last match. And I went up to Sal and I said, look, this is going to be my last match. I've never had an opportunity to take the bionic elbow from Dusty. Can you work it out? Can you work it out somehow that I can do a run in and let me feed in and give Dusty an elbow? He said, yeah, go ahead and do it. If you go over there and talk to Dusty, and which I knew Dusty from Crockett. So
Right.
He said, if Dusty's okay with it, you guys work it out. So I went over and explained it to Dusty what I wanted to do and why I wanted to do it. He said, yeah, kid, don't worry about it. I got you, baby. Just feed in there and I'll give you the elbow.
That's
and
awesome.
so I was very fortunate that that's what I wanted to do, is I wanted to do it. Matter of fact, I think he was working with Terry Funk that night. If I'm not mistaken.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was able to feed in and take an elbow from him, and took the Thunderfoot outfit off and never went back.
So technically your last move that you took was Dusty's elbow then. That's not bad.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Great way to end
right.
it,
Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. Right.
Yeah. Well, so what did you do after wrestling? What led after wrestling for you?
So I knew that I could not. I knew that I couldn't wrestle forever. I'd had some injuries. It's not something I wanted to do, continue doing. Because I had kind of lost my passion a little bit for the business at that particular time. And I really wanted to focus more on a career or life outside of wrestling. I already had something that I was working on. So I went back to school, finished up my bachelor's, and I got that taken care of, and even went back in 2012 and finished my MBA. And so I've been in business now in purchasing for quite some time. So right now I'm working for a company out of Chino Hills, California, called Harrington Industrial Plastics. We also have a branch down in Pineville, North Carolina, not too far from you, where you guys are maybe located at. But I wanted to do something outside of wrestling. I had to have something else I wanted to fall back on, so to speak, because I knew wrestling could not provide that lifestyle that I wanted to forever.
Right. Right.
So it's something that I wanted to do, and was able to do it. And I haven't looked back since. I think where I'm really blessed is the fact that I'm able to still, keep a lot of the friendships that I made in the wrestling business. Able to still connect with Tommy, with Sal and Gary Royal. I keep in touch pretty regularly with Greg Price, with Stan Hansen. So I've made some real solid friendships in the business, and I'm really excited that I still get to keep in touch with a lot of the guys that I used to travel with. So that's always a bonus.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, David, man, this has been an incredible interview, brother, and I thank you for giving us your time. You know,
absolutely.
We always end every show with the Plastic Sheik, my brother, the co-host. We always give him the last question of the night. So, Jared, go ahead and ask David.
And David, you may have already answered this with your the match in Australia with Paul Orndorff. Yeah. But would you consider that your favorite match? And if so, could you give us maybe another one that you would consider one of your favorite matches you ever had?
Yeah, you know, that's a great question. I really, honestly, if I had to say probably one of my favorite, I probably would say probably a couple of matches of mine that I was able to work on, and I think it's just part of a nostalgia for me was when I got to work with number one Paul Jones.
Oh yeah, very
cool. As a kid growing up in the Mid-Atlantic area, Paul Jones was a huge babyface.
Absolutely,
in the territory. So when I was working for the NAWA, Paul was doing some of the booking. He came back and said, "Hey, you and I are going to work together in a little spot show." He said, "What do you want me to beat you with tonight?" And I said, "Well, I want you to beat me with the Indian Deathlock."
Yeah.
He said, well, why would you want me to do that? And I said, Paul, because when I was growing up, that particular finish of yours, I was a huge mark for that growing up. That's what I want you to beat me with. And he beat me with it. So,
that's awesome.
That's awesome.
So that's probably a nostalgia thing that for me, I would say anybody that knew me growing up, back in Hendersonville, North Carolina, they knew that I was a huge Ric Flair fan at that time. And so any opportunity that I got to get it, you know, in the ring with Flair, I think that was probably a favorite of mine, just from a nostalgia point of view. And then I would say probably last but not least, you know, probably working with Wahoo. Wahoo, when I was able to work with Wahoo was kind of on the tail end of his career. So he had lightened up a whole lot. You know, so his chops were still pretty heavy, but not to the magnitude back when he was in the 70s working with a Johnny Valentine or the Anderson brothers.
Yeah.
So I would say that's probably from a nostalgia point of view, probably something that I'm extremely, extremely proud of.
You should be. Awesome. That's incredible. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, David, thank you so much again for giving us your time. And man, this has just been a true honor for you to do this for us and be on this show with us.
I certainly appreciate it. You know, it's given me an opportunity to come back and, you know, I'm sure there's so many things we didn't talk about because, you know, over the course of my career, you know, there was just so many positive things that happened, you know, guys that I was able to come across and, you know, have good solid matches with, and, you know, just an opportunity to, you know, to entertain a lot of people. And, you know, what I would say is, you know, anybody that thinks wrestling is fake or it's not real, I'm telling you guys, we're paying for it as we get older. We're paying for a lot of those injuries that we had got back early on in our lives. So, but it's the life I chose, and I'm happy I chose it, and I would do it over again in a heartbeat.
Yeah, well, anybody that says fake, they're not welcome on this show. So
yeah,
that's a bad word to us.
Yeah, exactly right. It just doesn't sit well with me.
Yeah, it's disrespectful, I think, to the legacy and the lives that have been lost to this business. And, you know,
and that's, you know, that brings up another great point. You know, I still, every year I get extremely sad, you know, some of the guys that have passed away. I mean, I was extremely close with, you know, Ray Traylor, you know, the boss man. He's just another guy that I don't ever, I'll never forget. He just made a real positive impact in my life.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, David. I don't think there's any better way to end this. So that you're the best, man. And we'll have a part 2 to talk about all those other stories. So coming soon.
We'll do it sometime, guys.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it.
All right. Well, we'll be right back to wrap things up with the Plastic Sheik on Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling.
Hey everyone, this is Shane from Insane Shane's World. I release wrestling figures of enhancement talent, mid-card wrestlers, and wrestlers that you never thought would have a figure available. So if you're interested in adding a really cool and rare figure to your collection, then don't hesitate to contact me at shamtheman73@gmail.com. That's SHAMtheman73@gmail.com. You can also join my Facebook group. Just search Insane Shane's World.
This is your rock star ring announcer, Aaron Camaro. I'm a man who believes the two greatest art forms ever created are professional wrestling and heavy rock music. So when I'm not hosting the best parties that also happen to be live professional wrestling shows, I'm hosting the Decibel Geek Podcast. Decibel Geek is a weekly podcast that features discussions of all things rock. We're talking the Beatles, the Stones, Led Zeppelin, Jimi Hendrix, Black Sabbath, Kiss, Ozzy, Motley Crue, Guns N' Roses, Metallica, Alice in Chains, Pantera, and everything in between. Plus, we'll turn you on to new bands from today that have the same spirit and style that the legends do. Decibel Geek is hosted by myself along with Rockin' Pod founder Chris Sinzak, and each week you'll get interviews with famous musicians and industry insiders along with informative, entertaining, humorous, and insightful discussions, and most importantly, a passion for the music. So if you love to rock out as much as I do, then this is your invitation to the greatest rock and roll party in all of podcasting. It's Decibel Geek, and it's available right now on all major podcast platforms. Oh yeah!
Oh, Sheik, one more time with an excellent interview, Mr. David Isley. What'd you think, man?
Man, he was just so giving, man. He literally knew our questions sometimes without us even asking.
I know.
He didn't have our notes, so it's crazy. But like we would get to talking about one person, and he'd be like, "Well, I got a story about this guy." And we're like, "Please, by all means, man."
Yeah.
Go ahead. So great storyteller, great conversation, man.
Yeah, and sometimes I feel like I am a slave to my questions. And so like I feel like if I'm, and we did skip a few things because that's just the way things are, and we don't ever want to be like so tied down to what we're planning to talk about that we can't have a full conversation, so I don't know, maybe we need to get away from the hard notes, but I don't know, I would be lost. I think I would lose my mind without those notes in front of me. But anyway, yeah, one thing I will say, I don't know who's next. I know we've got a really good couple of options coming up soon, so I don't know if we'll have them the next episode. I don't know if it'll be the one after that. I don't know if it'll be a couple episodes from now, but the very next episode is going to be awesome. I guarantee it. One or two of those options, if they come through. I do have a confirmation from one of them, but I also have a semi-confirmation from the other. I don't want to get in the way of, progress there. So I have some ideas, but one thing I think I want to do maybe is during the holidays while we're all together, maybe you and the kids, and me and Cash, maybe we can plan an episode. I don't know. Yeah. We're so rarely all together at once. It would be kind of fun if we could all get together and maybe have a fun episode like the Wrestling Superheroes one or something. I don't know. So
Paisley loves to listen to that episode with Cash in it just because she cracks up every time he says Colossus. So
yeah, well, we all did, So, well, put some thought to that. I'll put some thought to that. We'll see where we go with that. But maybe we'll try to do a family episode there at the very tail end of the year or at the very beginning. We'll see. But either way, the MO of this show. Give me back my pro wrestling. We definitely want to talk to our wrestlers about wrestling. So whatever it is, I'm sure it'll be a fun one, and hopefully the listeners will come along with us. this. One thing that's really blown my mind is we just recently on the Wolfie D podcast on Live and in Color with Wolfie D, we recently did Wolfie D's 50th episode. And Jared, I don't think I've ever worked harder for an episode in my life.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've been able to listen to it yet, but I tell you, I had to garner about 25 to 26 wrestlers and get them to record a quick message for Wolfie. And man, oh my gosh, it's like wrangling cats,
wrangling cats might be easier.
Yeah, it was. And it was just a very tedious texting, constantly messaging, hey brother, when can we do this, brother? Yeah. But I think it came out great. We've had a great response from that. You're going to see more of the kind of crossover of both shows. It's just simpler for me, and since I'm kind of the workhorse, I would say the workhorse behind both shows.
Absolutely.
You'll probably see a little more crossing over just because, some of the people we want to have as guests on our show that have been on the Wolfie show, some of the people that we've been on our show we might have on the Wolfie show. You never know. So, but I mean, it's all the same thing. Essentially, it's all the same network of sorts, right? So
I've heard of networks before.
Yeah. Well, yes, there are such things as networks, and I don't necessarily think networks work. But there's some great ones out there. If you want to go check out Gene Jackson's, he's got
Absolutely.
a great one with the Retro Wrestling Network. That's a lot of fun. He does a lot of great stuff. Also, you got to go check out Kroll's Nashville Wrestling Network, and that one's on YouTube. So go subscribe to that. Go subscribe to the Retro Wrestling Network. Go support those networks. As far as the James Rock Street production family of shows, we're not going to call that a network. We're just doing podcasts here. So, but I will give you some kudos, man. So I've kind of put you to task for making Sheik Shorts a much more focus, especially for you and for both podcasts. So I got to give you a major props. You've always done great work with it, but I've actually really started to put you really hard to work for this. So I feel like you're doing a great job.
Give me some inspiration. So.
Well, I mean, inspiration of, hey, please help me. but yeah, there's some fun things that you're doing there, and it looks like they're getting a lot of fun response too, especially on the YouTube and the Instagram and Facebook. Our Facebook Reels, they always do really well, and I got to give you props for that, man. So definitely, but you keep an eye out, y'all out there in listener land, keep an eye out for more from the Sheik's Shorts element of it. And if you do like it, subscribe to it, follow it, comment on it, do whatever, but we appreciate that as well. But one thing we got to say is, as always, we're at GMBMPW on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Y'all go follow those. Make sure you're up to date with all the happenings with the Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling podcast. We got some stickers, by the way. I've probably got 1, 2, 3, 4, a very limited amount of 5. So we've got 4 stickers right now. I tell you what, I'm going to do a little thing that I want to do, and I've wanted to do this for a while. So there's 3 things that you can do. You can rate us 5 stars on Spotify, and if you do that and you take a screenshot of that, or if you write a review and 5-star us on Apple Podcasts, and you take a screenshot of that, or if you show me that you are subscribed to the YouTube channel, okay, and you just lay down a comment on your favorite episode, your favorite video, whatever we do, and screenshot that, and you forward that to any of the DMs of the Instagram, the Facebook, or the YouTube of at GMBMPW, or you can email us at gmbmpw@gmail.com. I will send you a selection of those stickers. I may not be able to send all 5, limited supplies on one, but maybe we'll just get more of that one too. But when it comes down to it, 5 stickers, probably only 4 actually, but 4 stickers of all the different kinds of designs. You saw the pictures on social media. And if you didn't, that's a great reason to make sure you're subscribed so you will see them. Like I said, if you show us some love, 5 stars, screenshot it, review, screenshot it, comment, whatever, make sure you send it to us at GMBMPW or GMPW@gmail. I will send you a pack of stickers. So you'll get like 4 or 5, maybe 5, but definitely 4. Does that make sense, Jared? I'll send them some stickers. It does. Yeah.
Hey, you'll get an assortment of stickers.
Exactly. And it may just be somebody else's. No, I'm just kidding. It will be the podcast stickers because we bought these stickers to give away to promote the show. So I think that's a fun thing. And especially if y'all do that for us, I'll be glad to send them out on my dime. Okay. So yeah, that's the offer, guys. Y'all want them? Let us know. Okay. All right. Well, that's it. Sheik, you got anything else you'd like to say before we wrap up?
Real quick. I just want to say, look in my eyes. What do you see?
Yeah.
That was a crazy moment. Survivor Series, CM Punk. I'm not a Punk fan, but anytime you can see that bigger reaction from a crowd in wrestling, I'm a big fan of that. So
yeah, me too, man. Dare I say CM Punk in Chicago gets a Road Warrior pop, man. That's maybe even more, that's
big,
a pop.
Big time. Yeah.
GM, PM, CM Punk. Anyway, I was getting distracted there, but yeah, that was amazing. I got to see that with y'all. That was a lot of fun. We watched Survivor Series. We watched the majority of it after we had some dinner, and yeah, a lot of fun, man. A lot of fun.
Absolutely.
Very cool to see. And I just love that people, love wrestling. So whatever you do, if you don't want to get stickers, if you don't want to listen to us, whatever you do, just go love some pro wrestling and love the pro wrestling that you like. And don't let anybody tell you that you can't love the wrestling that you love, because I guarantee nobody could have told that to us. Right. So
absolutely. That's true.
Yeah. So do I love all the wrestling? No, I don't. But if you love it, man. Just like what you like. Who cares what anybody else says? There's too much subjective opinions in wrestling, and I don't love it all, but at the same time, if you love it, then it means something to you, and maybe one day you'll have a podcast about what you love, So
there you go. Absolutely.
There you go. Well, hey, Christmas is coming. Get those t-shirts. Well, you got links. We got Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling, and we got a Plastic Sheik t-shirt out there. Make sure you grab one of those for your favorite loved one. Grab it for the loved one you don't even like. But either way, they're great deals. $18.99 for either one of them. And if you buy 2, that means we love you more. So thank you. I tell you what, if somebody buys 2, okay, here's the deal. I will send you, because guess what? I get the email that tells me where you live and that you bought it, okay? If you buy 2 of the shirts, I will send you the sticker pack for free. That's another offer, Jared, that I'm just throwing out there right now. I feel like Don West on TNA right now. Rest in peace. Yeah. Well, anyway, y'all, thank you so much for listening to this episode of David Isley. Once again, we greatly appreciate y'all. Hope you're having a good day, and we'll see you next time on Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling.
Don't forget.
In my mind, I'm going to Carolina. Can't you see the sunshine? Can't you feel the moonshine? Ain't it just like a friend of mine to hit me with the axe handle from behind when I'm going to Carolina in my mind? Thanks, y'all.
With a tear in my eye, this is the greatest moment in my life.
This has been a James Rock Street production.